Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Before we get started, and if you haven't seen it already, my wife and I got to do a presentation to students at the local university on Tuesday of last week. The class is an honors class about social media and psychology, and we got to speak about Jehovah's Witnesses and propaganda and kind of tie it all into what people see today on social media. It was an amazing opportunity, and we were very excited about it. If you'd like to see the video, you can go to YouTube. If you look up our channel, it's called Shunned Podcast. That's one word, Shunned Podcast. And if you look it up there on YouTube, you'll be able to watch the entire presentation in full. Right now, my wife Jenny and I have some things that are changing for us in our life with work and financially, and we already kind of took a step back from some of our cleaning work so that we could do more things for the XJW community and just other groups that we're able to interview and interact with. I'm also doing coaching now. I just completed my first 4-session coaching / support group program with 6 former Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm looking forward to doing another class soon. If you're interested, go to my site, shunnedpodcast.com, click on the coaching page, and you'll get more information there as far as what we're going to kind of do within this coaching program. I haven't exactly announced the dates for the next sessions, but feel free to contact me through the page there if you're interested, and we'll get you in line to take care of that. Anyway, I'd already slowed down our cleaning work so that I could dedicate more time to this. Some things have slowed down more recently, and I'm replacing some of that with my coaching so that I can do more. I've even got an opportunity for paid work through a local community organization that's forming and that reached out so that they felt that my talents might help them in what they're doing. So my point to this is your donations to this podcast, along with taking these coaching courses, are actually helping me to have the time to dedicate to do more of this. To take time off to do this presentation that we did at the university, to spend the hours that I spend responding to emails and messages through my Facebook group, through the podcast, to keep these coming, these episodes at the new pace of 2 a month. And I've even got an opportunity to speak at a conference in another state at another university this fall. When I get the details nailed down on that conference, I'll let you know, because I think it's going to be in a very populous area. And I think there might be some of you that would really like to attend. So things are changing in a really good way. Your donations, however big or small, add up to help me devote more time to this and to cover some of the expenses. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to help, you can do so at patreon.com/shunned for as little as $1 a month. I know it doesn't seem like a lot sometimes, but all of it adds up, and it helps me to have less worries about that part of life so that I can focus on doing more work in this part of my life. To those of you that donate or participate in coaching, I just really want to sincerely say thank you for helping me. I mean, I know with the coaching, I'm helping you as well, but it doesn't matter. You know, all of this adds up, and it's helping me to live out part of my own dreams and being able to do what I'm doing and to help. Helping is why I do what I do. It's why I spend hours answering messages and replying to people and interviewing people every Sunday that I can at noon. Well, most Sundays, honestly, this year, I've been interviewing people and getting them to tell their stories because it helps them to do so. It's almost like talk therapy. Plus, then we have this podcast where they can listen back to their story or share it, and you all can give feedback. It's this whole environment that is created through this, and it really is a dream of mine. It always has been to help people. I mean, I've always liked helping people. I never really helped anybody as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, I preached to people and did all the things I was supposed to do, but now I'm actually helping real hurting human beings. And it's just a beautiful thing for me to be a part of. So I just want to thank anyone who is getting involved in this, whether it's through donations or taking courses or whatever. It truly is helping me to live out something for my own life as well. And it's a wonderful thing that I get to do, and I'm very humbled by the opportunity. I'm also very allergy-ish. It's spring, and I'm allergic to tree pollen, and you're going to notice in some interviews I don't always sound so great as we go through some of these over time. Sometimes the interviews are recorded on a different day than I'm doing the intro or the outro, but yeah. So welcome to the Ohio Valley portion of the podcast where Mike is coughing and sneezing and fairly miserable most of the time. So anyway, I just wanted to go ahead and get to the story for today. Today we're going to talk to Yolanda. This is one of those episodes where we've done some things to kind of hide identities. I really had to think about how I was going to describe this episode. The word that kept popping out at me and in my head is the word tough. Yolanda faced a lot of physical abuse to go along with verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and yes, even sexual abuse inside the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. But she comes through with this tough and resilient spirit. Yolanda isn't officially shunned, which is why we've done things to protect her identity. In fact, on the other side, she's become her house has become a haven for some shunned people in her local area. Her story needs to be told because it's indicative of a lot of what goes on behind closed doors inside the organization. You know, you have these insular groups and so many things are secretive and so many people are putting on false appearances and facades so that they look the way that they need to look. But that doesn't tell the story of what's going on behind closed doors. If you remember, as witnesses, we used to talk about that scripture. I don't know where it is, but it referred to whitewashed graves that look so nice, but inside were full of dead men's bones. Well, you know, the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses has done a lot to whitewash the realities within their organization. And there's just so much that goes on that needs to be exposed. And there's so much in this story that's going on that is going to show you how, you know, just inside just another J-Dub family, a family that you know had elders in it that looked the part. There was so much going on. You're going to see again how things like sexual abuse are perpetuated through this veil of secrecy. There's even an interesting part about kind of the hierarchy in the organization and how that plays a part in covering up sexual abuse. So let's just go ahead. Let's jump in without further ado and let's meet Yolanda.
Well, my name is Yolanda, and I am 52 years old, and I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I have a pretty interesting story to tell.
All right, Yolanda. So how did you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? Were you born in?
Not technically, because my parents, they became Jehovah's Witnesses when I was, I guess they started studying when I was like 4 and then got baptized when I was around 5 or 6. It was in the early 70s.
Gotcha. So then you never, I mean, you had a life before, but it's not something you're really probably going to remember very much.
Not too much from there. But when I say my parents, I speak about my mother and my stepfather. My biological father was not a witness. As a matter of fact, he was completely opposite of that. When I say that, you know how Jehovah's Witnesses have that whole, demons and demon worshiping and all of that stuff. Well, my father was, he's called, in the islands, he's called a spiritist.
Oh, okay.
Literally with the cutting the doves' heads off shit.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty opposite of one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Exactly. All right. So was he really in your life or?
Well, my mother, when she divorced him, I was around 2 years old and she didn't want anything to do with him. And she moved to New York from the islands, from Puerto Rico. And I would see him on my summer vacations. I would spend the whole summer vacation there with him and that side of my family.
Gotcha. So you did get to see him then, and he was somewhat an influence in your life.
Yes, he was.
Okay. And now you said that this was the early 70s when you came in, or your parents started, or your mom and stepfather started studying. Um, was that so? Then was that before the 1975 craze?
Of course it was. It was around 1971, somewhere around that time. So yeah, she was one of the mass that went in there.
Gotcha.
My stepfather had just got back from Vietnam, and he was going through his own traumatic situations. And my mother was looking to. I actually asked them about their story, how they got into it. I asked them about a month ago, and why. And my mother basically said that she had lost her father, my grandfather, um, and that was the most devastating thing to her. And basically, they caught her in a time of mourning.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a vulnerable time for people, and it seems like that is when people get caught up in the cult, in the doctrine. You know, they come teaching something a little bit different, and people sometimes find comfort in that if they don't have something else.
Yeah, and then my stepfather, having seen so much stuff in Vietnam and probably having done so much things in Vietnam, that he came back with the PTSD, which he still suffers from. And I guess this gave him some kind of promise, the whole no more war, everything in peace, everything's going to be kumbaya.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the exact opposite of what he had experienced. So you can understand why people get drawn to the teachings.
Yeah.
It's really a pretty good sales pitch if you think about it.
It is.
They don't lead with the whole shunning thing, but
Oh, of course not.
they don't let that slip out right off the bat. They lure you in first with things that sound really nice.
Oh yeah, that's like going to that restaurant that it's great, the food tastes delicious and the great presentation, but if you go in the kitchen, you see rats.
Yes, absolutely. So you said 4 or 5. I don't know if it really meant anything to you, immediately, but how did you kind of start to see the world inside the cult?
Well, around that time, my life changed dramatically because my biological father, he remarried at the same time that my mother did remarry, and both of them around the same time had started having children. But what started there for me was just violence, complete and utter, all types of violence and abuse.
And that started with when I say your parents, I'm just going to refer to your stepfather and your mother,
Yeah.
who you were with most of the time.
Yeah.
So that started with your parents when they became witnesses?
I want to say it did because that's as far as back as I can remember. Again,
Okay.
and I don't know if it started because of the witnesses, which I'm pretty sure that it did. It could have just started because my mother is the type of person that she gets very influenced by what other people tell her, and she's a very people pleaser, which is something that cults like.
Yep.
And according to her, she changes her story every now and again, but she was trying to please her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law basically, what she claims is that her mother-in-law told her that she needs to put discipline on me, and then she started disciplining me, which I find that to be a load of shit because I talked to her recently, and I was, just chatting with her about what the kind of person she was, and I never asked her point blank had she actually said those words, but based on the story she told me about her past and how she views things, there's no way that lady would have said something like that.
Yeah, that's it's really awful that they and kind of ironic that here they become Jehovah's Witnesses and then the violence starts.
Yes.
It's not really, at least if you ask a witness, that's not how it's supposed to be. But there is a lot of pressure that comes along with joining a cult like that to keep your children in line and to keep them going a certain way by any means necessary.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of frustration because there's a lot of burdens placed on the parents to perform and to be the perfect witnesses. So, I mean, you could see how I'm not going to blame the religion on the abuse, but you can see how the pressure might cause that to come out of people if they're kind of wired that way.
Yeah, and she was definitely wired that way.
Gotcha.
Wired that way. One of the things that I know is also that I didn't mention was the fact that my biological father was very abusive, and that was to all his wives. He's married multiple times.
Gotcha.
And of course, it's never him; it's the women.
Of course.
But he was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer. He would sleep around and then beat his wives, and that's just the way he was. That's the way he was wired. What's ironic about all of that is that when I asked my mother not too long ago why she joined, and a little bit about my past, she had said, "Oh, I was terrified that your father was going to start beating you." And I'm like, I just know you freeze and nothing moves, and then your eyes go to the left and to the right. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You get me away from violence, but you're the one that subjected me to the violence. And then also my biological father never raised his voice at me or my sister, the one that he had, with his marriage, or much less laid a finger on me or any of us.
It's crazy how, if you look at a lot of the things the cult teaches in their doctrine, a lot of the things that they talk about as being what other religions do or other people on the outside do, a lot of times it's almost like a projection of the things that they actually do.
Yes.
The things they're accusing others of is the very thing that they do. And here in this case, your mom is accusing your biological father of being a certain way, but she's doing that same thing to you.
Precisely.
It's there's a disconnect there, and you see how this cycle of abuse gets perpetuated, and then here your mom is now joining what is honestly an abusive cult. They're emotionally abusive and religiously abusive to people. So you're this kid, you're getting, the violence has started in your home. What about what the other changes that come along with being a young witness kid? The holidays, how did your life start to change in other ways?
Well, as far as holidays are concerned, it's basically the same thing. Everything is bad, and everybody in the world is going to die. And when you go to school, you kind of view everybody differently. And I would be sad when I'd go to school. I actually remember having a breakdown in school when I was in elementary school. And we had some kind of auditorium, and they start all these assemblies with pledge allegiance to the flag. Mm-hmm. And I broke down because I'm like, oh my God, everybody who has their hands on their heart is going to die. And they actually had to take me out of there because I just broke down. I remember that being a big part. As far as missing, you never miss what you didn't have. And I never really had Christmas. I never really had those holidays. Now, being that my birthday is in the summer, when I would go with my father, he would celebrate my birthday. And I think part of it was also just to piss my mother off.
Well done.
Exactly. He would make sure to make a big hoopla.
Of course he would. Well, did you enjoy it? How was it for you to have that little piece of something to celebrate, or did you just feel guilty?
Yes, I would enjoy it, but then feel guilty about enjoying it, so I really couldn't enjoy it that much. It was like, oh my God, I'm going to get struck down. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen now if my mother finds out, you know?
They just have a way of choking the joy out of everything, don't they?
Yeah.
Um, so you at least did get the birthdays, and um, for what that was worth,
Right.
obviously. Um, what about at the Kingdom Hall? How were you kind of adjusting there? Were you, one of the little kids that got into giving talks and commenting, and was that cute little kid that everybody loved, or were things kind of different for you?
Well, the things were different for me basically because of the abuse that my mother had on me. She actually continued that into the Kingdom Hall. When I say that, it was because um, she basically put a big old label on me saying that I'm the bad kid and that the rest of the kids shouldn't be hanging around with me.
Mm.
And so therefore I wasn't that kid that they would choose to do anything. I was really always kind of alone unless it was my siblings or my cousins. I would talk with people in the Kingdom Hall, but I never had any real friends in the Kingdom Hall growing up like that. Um, and again, it's like I would hear my mother tell these stories, and I guess in her mind, she was like, if I embarrass her, she'll stop doing it. So all these people knew everything that I would do to the point of how I left my underwear on the floor.
Wow. So what? Yeah. So what kind of story? First of all, I'm sorry, and that's awful. It is amazing. So I kind of have a theory about uh, kids that are bullied. I think that kids that are bullied are often, like at school and things like that, by peers. I think that they're often bullied because they've been bullied at home, and I know that was the case for me. And it's like you're putting off a scent that bullies can pick up on because it starts at home. And here your mom is basically kind of bullying you and putting you down, and then you go to the Kingdom Hall, and it's going to be hard to have friends because you've got that scent on you almost. You're putting off that vibe, and then your mom is literally sabotaging you.
Yeah.
That's so tough to overcome. What kind of, like, what were these big bad things, if you don't mind sharing, or if there's something you said like the underwear on the floor, like what I mean, that's a normal that's a thing a normal kid does. uh,
Right.
I mean, was that pretty much the extent of it?
My mother, here's the thing, I look exactly like my biological father. I
Oh,
mean, if you put pictures of us when we were young, you couldn't tell the difference between us.
gotcha.
My mother absolutely hates, and will always hate my father. Although, being the Christian that she is, she doesn't hate anybody. She's forgiven him. Correct. All
Hmm.
right. And everything that my father did to her and all the hurt that she felt, she actually took it out on me. Every beat down that he gave her, she multiplied it severely on me. And there were times as a teenager that I remember we were sitting at the table eating dinner. Somebody said a joke. I laughed. My mother took my face, squeezed my cheeks, not in a loving way, and gritted her teeth. And she goes, "You look so much like your father." And then pushed my face away.
Oh my god.
And she would always say how my father was ugly, yet everybody would say how my father was so good looking. If he was so ugly, I'm just saying, why did you end up with him?
Yeah, that says something about you.
And why did you marry him? And why were you so, as they say, long suffering for him?
Yeah, wow.
But I mean, I've shown pictures of my biological father to people at work, and they're like, "Oh my God, he looks like the guy from the." I don't often drink, but when I do, that guy, the most interesting man in the world.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dos Equis guy.
Yeah,
I don't.
Dos Equis guy. That's right.
So obviously, my father can't be that bad looking.
Right. She was just projecting her stuff onto you.
Yeah, and the abuse started. Any little thing would trigger her. I can't say that I was doing anything outside of what normal kids would do. Um, I wasn't like lighting fires. I wasn't, breaking things. As a matter of fact, because of all of this, I believe that I developed that whole OCD condition. And literally, I would play with my toys. I would keep the boxes and I would put them back the way they came after I finished playing with them. So it wasn't like I was a messy kid.
Yeah, you developed, you need to control things because
Yes,
things around you are so out of control and it might come back on you if you don't control all your stuff.
yes.
Yeah.
And school, I wouldn't let anybody my age bully me. I would fight back because that's something my biological father taught me, It's like,
Right.
don't take any shit, you know.
But yet at
but
home you had to take it.
but as far as adults are concerned,
Yeah.
I received massive, abuse from adults, and I couldn't do anything about it. Like in school, I have a horrendous story that when I first started school, I first grade, they had moved to an all Jewish neighborhood, and I live in Texas now, and everybody talks about the, prejudice and all of that. I've never received so much prejudice and so much abuse as I did in an all Jewish neighborhood in New York.
Because you were different.
Yeah, because we were one of maybe 5 families that were non-Jewish. And this was in the 70s, so they could treat you how they wanted. And my teacher grabbed me by the arm, put me in front of the class, said, look at her skin. She looks like she doesn't bathe. Look at her hair. It looks like you can mop the floor with it. And had the kids join in and teasing me. And because I'm like an almond color, I guess you could say. But when I told my mother, she punished me because she said I was lying. There's no way an adult would do that. Then the teacher quickly realized that if she sent anything home with me, I would get beat down. And when I say beat down, it would start the minute I would get home. My mother would literally say, okay, you did this wrong. She would put me literally in a closet all day long. Occasionally open it up to give me some water. Then would wait for my stepfather to come home. And she had come up to find out later on, she would be antagonizing him all day long to the point that he was so angry when he got home. I had to strip down to just my underwear so that he could proceed to beat the shit out of me with the belt. I would go to school with black and blue marks wrapped around my body. It wasn't just a punch here, a punch. It was wrapped around my body. This is the true Christians that they are.
Yeah,
So then the teacher, that she hated me just because I wasn't one of them, she picked up on that. So she started sending home little notes saying, "Oh, she behaved badly, or she did this or did that or the other." So then it would start again. My mother went through the whole spectrum of abuse. It was like she would have me kneel on rice if it wasn't in the closet, or kneel on the cheese graters that on one side it has really pokey sides on.
Oh my God.
Yeah. She tried kneeling me down on that. It was like she went through the whole spectrum of abuse.
All the while going to the Kingdom Hall.
Yes.
And looking like the happy little family, right?
Yep.
Wow. And I just have to say, the point you brought up about going to the Jewish school and the way that you were, I don't know what term I want to use, but profiled or whatever, and then the very racist way that you were treated. It's so sad because Jewish people, of all people, know what it's like to be persecuted.
Oh yeah, I mean, and in that neighborhood, I saw people that still had the tattoos from the concentration camps.
Right. But it's so interesting, and it's just such a human thing. It's the old phrase, "shit rolls downhill."
Yep.
Your biological father beats your mother and she beats you. And people have persecuted people, and then those people in turn persecute others. And it's just a thing, it's just a very human thing. It's a very sad thing. It's a very awful thing, but it is a very human thing. And I'm sorry that you were subjected to that. It's just, I don't know, it just really struck me, just the, I don't know if irony is the correct term, but
Yeah.
just the way that happened. And it's just, everybody in life is fighting for some sort of power, and unfortunately a lot of times it comes at the expense of someone that they can put down.
Exactly.
And then you see it in the cult too. There's the us versus them. As far as the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, you have us, the witnesses, and them, the evil, worldly, awful people who God is going to kill so we can be happy. It's just such an awful thing that we spend a lot of time doing a lot of very unproductive and unfruitful things.
Yes.
Your mother sounds horrific. The ways that she essentially almost tortured you. It's like she was getting something back out of that as well, power wise.
Excuse me.
Oh, that's all right.
Yes. She was, I guess, the middle child of 12. And I guess to this day, she suffers from wanting attention, and she'll do anything to get attention. And my mother, I guess one of the main things is that my father didn't give her the attention that she wanted. And that's why it must have all started. I don't know. I'm speculating at this point, just based on knowing who she is. My mother, she's very much a people pleaser. And cults thrive on abusing that.
Yeah.
And she, in the Kingdom Hall, would be the perfect pioneer. She's the perfect sister. She goes out of her way to help everybody. And the most irritating thing to this day is, oh, you're so lucky to have her as a mother. I wish I had a mother like that. And she is so great. And you just need to thank Jehovah God for having her as a mother. And I'm like, are you serious?
No, I totally understand. So how did it look? I mean, my dad was an elder. He was very emotionally abusive. He was pretty awful. We had to go to my mom would talk to the elders about him. Then the elders would want to meet with at least me as the oldest kid and ask me to corroborate things. Not that they ever did anything. They didn't care. But, I know how it is to sit there and, my own father would get up on stage and give talks about happy family life on Sunday. My mom would literally leave the auditorium, but we kids had to be good kids and sit there and listen to that crap.
No.
So how did, I know how it feels, but in your voice, how did it feel to see the duplicity of your mom and the way people reacted to it?
It would just make me so angry. It really would. But I had to learn to bite my tongue, because then it would just be worse for me. Right. My stepfather became an elder, in probably the late 70s. So yeah, it was, to them, they'd walk into the Kingdom Hall and they were, the cream of the crop. They were the rock stars. Yeah. To this day, I can't walk somewhere. Oh, your mother, blah, 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 oh, your mother's blah, 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 and if they don't remember me, all I have to say, I'm so-and-so's daughter. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Their reputation precedes you.
Yes, very much so. And it's like my stepfather would get up there like yours, give these talks about how family life and love and respect and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and yet all I have to do was look down and see all the bruises on me.
Oh, that's so horrible.
Of course, they were very Very, now that I think about it, actually, this right now just came to my mind. I never had any markings on my face.
Well, sure. You don't want people to be able to see that.
So they were methodical about it.
Yeah, you got to be strategic about where you abuse
Right.
children, which is awful. Um, I have to ask you, you've made a couple statements about the 70s. So I don't know how old you were in 75, but are you old enough, or were you old enough to remember kind of what everything was like around then, or what your parents were like?
Oh yeah, we went to the Spanish congregation, and there was a lot of brothers that would buy a Cadillac or get into a big debt, rack up a bill on a credit card, thinking that, well, I ain't got to pay this back. And so
Yeah,
many of them ended up getting repossessed or they lost their card. I remember after a while, somebody had a nice muscle car, right?
right.
And it's like one day it's like, well, they don't have it anymore, you know?
Well, it's okay. That wasn't a good service car anyway, probably.
Right, right.
Do
And
you remember them talking? So for those who are listening who are unaware, just in case, because a lot of people listen, 1975 was a year that Jehovah's Witnesses had kind of deemed as the end of the world. That this is when uh, Armageddon was going to start, and it was going to be salvation for Jehovah's Witnesses. This is something that so the witnesses are really great at saying a thing without saying the thing. So what they do is they'll float something out there, and 1975 was pointed at several times from the late 60s until 75 as being the year that something momentous was going to happen. There was a slogan, "Stay alive till 75." This was going to be the year where this change was going to happen. And then, of course, it didn't, but people had sold everything they had and given money to the Watchtower organization of Jehovah's Witnesses and cashed out life insurance policies and given the money because they weren't going to need it, and just done all this stuff. Of course, they never got their money back when 75 came and went. But, people did a lot of things to maybe downsize and go preach more because they thought they were saving people at the end of the world. And so there was this huge influx of new witnesses. So, Yolanda, do you remember hearing, people specifically talking about 75?
oh yeah, they would definitely say, our time is short. We only have one more year or 6 more months or however much time to get as many people as we can and save as many people as we can. Because if not, it would be our responsibility, and then we would be blood guilty, guilty of their death, and therefore not be or not have the privilege of passing on to the new, and surviving the Armageddon, because of the blood guilt of not getting as many people as possible.
Right. So it's just interesting. It's nice to hear that, out of from someone, because I don't know how many of us really. I don't think. I'm sure I knew people who went through it, but that was when I was a witness, and of course, you can't ask about that.
Right.
That's a hush hush thing. Nobody wants to talk about 75.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just interesting to actually get to hear that from somebody who was there. So, how did that impact you as a kid seeing it? What were you thinking? I don't know how old you were in 75, but how old were you? And then what were you kind of seeing and thinking as that was going on?
Well, in 75, I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And again, it was things that I would hear people say, the little things that I would hear my family talk about. I can't say that I read it in a magazine because
Yeah.
I have, at that point, it wasn't diagnosed, but it is now. I have dyslexia, so there's no way I was going to read anything.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that makes it difficult.
Yeah, so it's like, but one of the things that this dyslexia does is it makes you rely a lot on your memory. So therefore, I would remember things. I would hear things, and it's locked in. just because I couldn't read it. I developed this ability to remember crap that I wish I could forget. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I understand. How were you feeling around that time? Like, were you scared or excited?
Yeah. I would get, definitely those whole nightmares of Armageddon. And I remember more than one occasion, my mother wanted to wake me up, and I guess I didn't want to wake up for field service or for whatever crap it was. Um, and she actually told me, Yolanda, wake up, wake up. The paradise is here.
No, no.
And I'm like, what? So I'd run outside to see if I had my panda and my, time. And then she's laughing,
Oh my God, that is so messed up.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, wow. And, here we are in 2019, and I haven't held a panda yet. I don't know about you, but
No, not yet.
So how did things, it sounds like childhood was pretty awful in just about any environment. How did things progress as you went into your teenage years and young adulthood? Were you pressured? Did you get baptized? Did you start to, pioneer in the summers or do anything like that? How did your life go? Were there any significant events as you progressed through your teenage years?
Well, being that my mother thought that I was the child of Satan, and she, of course, projected that to everybody else, how troublesome I was and how she would have to deal with me so much. So I never got pushed into being, a pioneer. I never, hey, you need to do these parts. You need to. She never pushed me to that, and nobody ever expected that of me because, of course, they thought I was Satan's child. And
you were
exactly
on a level from what I've heard so far. But I digress.
Right. Then, so it's like I don't remember ever being pushed to be more theocratical. I guess in my mother's mind is like, this is Satan's child and she's going to die anyway, so I'm not going to put too much care into her kind of crap.
Yeah.
Now, my siblings, they were all glory, and I have no ill will towards them. I love them, all of them, because I know that this had nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
This was all my parents. And the only one that ever actually got hit, not as much as me, but quite, he would get pretty hit, was my brother, was because, and I love him for this, even as a child, he was like, it doesn't make sense. So, in their minds, he was just not being rebellious, because for me, it was rebellion. For him, it was, what was it? Not rebellion. It was just going against the headship,
Oh, okay.
And because he was a boy, remember, it's different for girls and boys.
Sure.
And he was expected to be my stepfather's, successor.
Right.
But my brother is a brilliant person, and there's no way that he was just going to accept things like that. And when he would question things, I remember this one time he came, and he had a whole bunch of the volumes, Watchtower volumes and books to prove his point.
Uh-oh. That doesn't go over well.
No, and my stepfather is basically, you're going to do what I say, even if I tell you to jump off a cliff because I said so, and I'm the head of the house.
Oh, yeah, because I said so.
Mm-hmm. And you have to listen to me, so that didn't go over. But none of the other siblings ever suffered any of that. My sister that follows me, she knows the things that I went through. And I guess in her own way, it traumatized her. And she never wanted to go through that, so she became the perfect child, the perfect poster child, Jehovah's Witness, to this day. Not to say that she hasn't done her things.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that,
but she looks the part.
Yes, she does. Yeah. She does. But my mother had three other, kids. And out of her four children, that one sister is the only one that goes to the meetings.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Does your mom still?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
She's I mean, head deep into that.
Gotcha. So what about you? Did you end up getting baptized?
Well, I didn't get baptized, and I did get baptized, but it wasn't until my late 20s. But going forward from let's backtrack a little bit. My teenage years, they moved from New York to Texas in 79. My mother made it a point to say, "Oh, we're going on vacation to visit your aunt or her sister." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." We would do that. My family was one that every year they would try to make a family vacation. They would do it around Christmas time, because that's when everybody was off. And they would rent a car, and we would drive from New York to Florida, New York to South Carolina. So we drove from New York to Texas. It wasn't something that was abnormal. Later on, I found out that the minute that we drove off, we were no more than a block away, that she had one of her other sisters packing up the apartment, and we were moving to Texas. She didn't tell me this because she knew that I still had family from my biological father's side there. And that she told me we were moving, I would call them up and say, I'm not going with them.
Oh, gotcha.
So she did that really sneakily. And we moved to Texas, and all of a sudden she's like, "Okay, well, next week you're going to school." And I'm like, "What?" I didn't want to go to school here. And I just expressed that like that. And that's the first and only time that I ended up going to school with a black eye.
Oh, gosh. So did the teachers ever notice this?
I had a teacher in elementary school that did notice. And I don't know if it was because, maybe I rolled up my sleeve and she saw the bruises. Maybe I flinched. Maybe I don't know. I know that whatever way it wasn't a deliberate thing on my end,
right?
To say, "Hey, look what they're doing to me." And this was I think my third or fourth grade teacher. I don't remember, but I know that I was still in elementary school, and she ended up like, "What the heck is this?" And she is the only adult that actually said, "No, this is wrong." She called up my mother. And to this day, my mother says that all I was trying to do is get her in trouble.
Oh, well, yeah, it's your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Of course it's your fault. Everything is.
But I guess they went through whatever they went through. But I was never taken out of the house. Nothing ever came of it. Of course, I was told never to mention it again, even though I was still getting beat down at school.
So how did you get around the black eye? Was that did you trip and fall or something?
Oh, no, I didn't have to explain anything. It was basically one of those things that, she has a black eye. She comes from New York. She must have been in a gang.
Okay.
So actually that ended up being exactly the way I said it. And I had some kids that were like, "Oh, so you think you're big badass because you're from New York?" And I'm like, "Look, man, I'm just trying to go to school here. Just let me get through the day." And I ended up having to fight. But it was so much so that even the teachers saw the abuse of the bullying, and that I was trying to walk away, that when I fought back and beat the living daylights out of that girl, the teachers didn't do anything. They were like, "Okay, I guess she must have had a reputation for being the school bully." And they didn't. Yeah, they didn't do anything.
Yeah, that's. It seems like everywhere you end up going, you have to fight your way out of something, or you're getting beaten, or I mean, the physicality of this young life is pretty tough.
Yeah.
How did you cope? Did you most kids are going to try to escape into something. Did you kind of maybe like escape into books or TV or sports?
Well, I really wasn't allowed to do anything from, TV because, it's just, especially in the 70s, we only had one television in the house, and it wasn't like now that you could just pick up something, and that was, you could watch whatever you want to. It was like it had to be a family event to, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess I must have internalized it because I don't remember having really any hobbies like that. Not until later on in my teens, and when we moved to Texas, that's when I was 13 or something like that. And that's when, anybody, male or female, that's when you start to develop.
Oh yeah.
But then when your body is growing into itself and things start growing, things start happening. And my stepfather decided he was going to have a study with me. He was going to have his personal study with me, And in those personal studies, he would eventually start sitting me closer and closer to him. And then he would put his arm around me. And I was like, okay, this is great. No more beat down. And then slowly, but surely, he started putting his hands down my shirt. And this is hard.
No, I understand, and you don't have to say anything you don't want to.
So that's when the sexual abuse started. I've got to say, I wasn't raped, but there was a lot of touching. I remember one time coming home from a little get together my aunt had, and she lived a block away, and I went home to take a nap because I'm like, this is an aunt that I cannot stand, and she's the bane of my existence. So I'm like, I'm going home. And I went home, took a nap, and I woke up. He, to this day, doesn't know that I was awake when this happened. He came to the house, laid down, and rubbed himself on me. I pretended to be asleep the whole time.
Wow. It's so sad and awful how people groom kids.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, I really appreciate the way that you showed that, it starts off so simple. He was just having his personal study with you, right?
Yep.
And then, it's just the sitting closer and closer, and just there's a graduation of all this stuff as a boundary is slowly being pushed.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, a kid finds themselves in a situation, because a kid doesn't see this coming. No kid thinks that this is about to happen. And then once it does, it's so overwhelming.
And confusing.
Yeah, it's got to be confusing that you don't know what to do with it. And I mean, who are you going to tell? And
at this point, one of the things that they do as grooming is concerned is they start labeling people as troublemakers, so that the minute that if you were to say something, then, she's just a troublemaker anyway, so that didn't happen.
Just like Jehovah's Witnesses label people on the outside, these evil apostates, if you leave, so that nobody will listen to you.
Exactly.
Right. It's the same thing. It's all abuse, and the patterns are the same in so many different ways, but they've labeled you a certain way so that nobody has to listen to you.
Right. So basically, if I were to say something, it's going to get whatever, it's just her being her,
Right. Just crazy Yolanda, don't pay any attention to her.
Right.
That is so awful.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to say evil there. Yeah, that is so evil.
It's maniacal. It really is.
It really is. I mean, you're literally preying on children. The power dynamics there are obvious and just so sick. So how did that go, or what did you do with that?
Well, it went on for a few years, and it got to the point that I remember my mother I don't know why, I can't recall that detail of it, but she started like screaming at me, of course, the whole devil child thing. And my stepfather was there, and he started in on me. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm like, and I looked at my mother and I said, you guys think you're so perfect, yet this guy is over here touching me. Of course, immediately before I finished the word touching, the hand was up and across my face. And then...
Was that from your mom?
That was my stepfather.
Oh, your stepfather?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So he knew what was coming.
Yeah, exactly. Gotcha. And then, I was so like, oh my God, my teeth just rattled in my mouth, I'm like, shit, so at that point, I'm just focusing in on the pain that I'm feeling in my face. We're talking about a grown-ass man that has military training, slapping, a teenager. And then I guess they were arguing, whatever happened. I'm like folded over. I don't remember too much in the immediate, scenario, but then later on that evening, I guess they had talked about it, and he must have admitted something, because then they were like, okay, let's talk to me. They pulled me over. They wanted to talk to me in their room. And my mother's like, did this really happen? And I'm like, yes, it did, And then she asked my father, my stepfather, did that really happen? Quite honestly, I don't remember if his answer was yes, but I guess he left it at that. Because I also remember he said something like, whatever she said happened. That's it. He didn't admit anything other than that. He didn't go into details to say, yes, I did this, this, and that. So he left it very open.
Right. And very quick too, so it's kind of dismissive, even though he said yes, it's kind of dismissive.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know the conversation that took place, prior to me going into that room. I don't know if she asked them and they came up to an agreement like, oh, she must have dreamt this, and so I'm just going to agree to it because, it'll make her feel better kind of crap. Maybe he did that. I don't know. Because it was so... But the thing is, my mother did say, well, then we're going to have to call the elders. And I'm like, call the elders.
Oh, well, how did that go?
Oh, that was horrific. Of course, I am a teenager. At this point, I'm 15? And I'm sitting in front of these nasty, dirty, disgusting old men. And they're like...
3 of them, I assume?
3 of them.
Yeah.
And these are people who, plumbers, mechanics, cleaners, whatever it is, but they don't have any kind of training in this kind of crap.
Yep.
And so I'm sitting in front of these dirty old men, and they're asking me explicit details.
Yep.
What happened? When did it happen? The most horrific question was, did you enjoy it? Did your body react to it? So always throwing the blame on me.
Well, yes. And if you know anything about abuse or just the way the human body works, your body can react to a thing because, it is a stimulating thing, but your mind can be crying out for help at the same time.
All I say is the only thing that I could compare it to is men in their prostate exams. Some of them do react to that.
Right. But I that's right. I think I just wanted to bring that up because I think that a lot of people blame themselves if they you can physically feel pleasure while at the same time mentally be being traumatized.
Yes. Yeah.
The two are not all the same, and that doesn't mean you wanted it. It doesn't mean that you liked it. It's no reflection of you, the victim of this abuse. It's that's just the way the human body works.
Especially when you're a teenager and your hormones
Yes.
at its highest point. The
Of
wind
course.
blows by and you're like, whoa, what was that?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. But I wonder, and I wanted to say that because I just want people out there, if you have been abused, to understand that. Don't take that on yourself just because there was some physical pleasure, because that's separate. That's just
Yes.
something your body does automatically. You just because you respond in some way automatically does not mean that
That it
that's
was right.
that. What was that?
That it was correct. That was a right.
Right.
That, that that it was the right thing to do as far as the adult is concerned.
Right. They were the fucking adults,
Correct.
and they took advantage of you. And I want people to understand that, and I don't know. I wonder if the elders understand that, and I doubt they do, because they probably wouldn't ask that fucking question and put you in that place if they didn't think that, she experienced some sort of pleasure or reaction physically, so therefore she must have brought this on, which is the moralization of literally everything that Jehovah's Witnesses do.
Yeah.
And it's sickening that they're asking. They should not ask that question. Well, they shouldn't even be having that conversation.
Not at all.
That needs to be for the proper authorities that they supposedly respect in this world, and it's not for three untrained men to try to suss out and the power dynamics of just three men in a. I mean, was there anybody there with you, or was it just a 15-year-old girl?
A 15-year-old female with three disgusting old men, and they asked me questions like, what was I wearing? Do I walk around the house in my underwear? Which in retrospect makes me think that's probably what he said.
I don't care if you walked around the house naked. It doesn't matter. Like, it's so stupid. You can see where they're setting up for the victim blaming right off the jump.
Yes. And being that, my parents were the rock stars, and my stepfather, if I'm not mistaken, at one point he was what is that called? Presiding overseer? Not the,
presiding overseer. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the head man in charge, and he spoke very eloquently. He does speak very eloquently,
Sure.
And one of the things that I remember finishing that interrogation. And one of the elders pulled me aside and he goes, that he's a very good man. He's an excellent brother. He's helped out a lot of people. He says, you need to be careful how you walk around the house, because at the end of the day, he is a man and he does have needs.
What?
Yes.
There are no words. There's just no words. That's awful, horrible. Like, there's no word that lives up to the disgust that a person has hearing that.
Yes. I mean, it literally makes my throat just fill up with bile. I can't imagine one of my nieces or nephews being told that.
No, I mean, no one should ever be told that. And if his needs are that strong, then maybe that fucker needs to be castrated. Like, if this guy can't control himself, I guess this is the whole boys will be boys thing.
Yes. Especially in the Hispanic culture, because it's very, misogynistic even without a cult.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I just assume all culture is, but I can't speak to Hispanic culture.
Yeah. Hispanic culture is very much the man is the man and he has needs. And that's why you get a lot of these women that, even worldly, air quotes,
right,
women that will deal with whatever their husbands do, because, he is a man and he's going to have his needs as long as he comes home to me.
All right. I mean,
Mhm.
hey, if that's how you all get down and like you don't, if a person has an open relationship and they're happy with that and everybody's
That's
happy, but that's when everybody has freedom.
exactly. That's different. That's way
Not just
different.
not just the man having freedom to do whatever he wants, and
Yes.
it's yeah, that's I honestly think that all of this stuff, I think it's all getting better. I really do. I just think that humankind has started out in some pretty shitty places,
Mhm.
and it's taking some time. But I mean, we're having these discussions, and people are talking about these things more openly, and I think that's going to be the start of some change.
I would hope so.
I think that
I
you can
know that,
already see some things changing.
yeah, I know that people are a lot more educated now. They're not more aware.
Yeah.
They know that they have a lot more options now.
I mean, if you think about it, there are people who are still alive from when slavery was a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like the generations have to die off. I mean, I mean that's unfortunate, but I mean that's people who have held a strong belief their entire life, as we know as ex Jehovah's Witnesses, don't often change the way they see everything in the world. It happens, some of us make it out, but there's still so many that are stuck in it,
Yeah.
and they don't see anything different. And I just think it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time. If you look at evolution, the physical process takes billions of years. If you look at just how far we've come in the last century, I think that a lot has changed, but there's still a lot of old attitudes and old feelings, and it's going to take a while to weed that out. And it'll always, I'm sure, exist on some level, but
Yeah.
humans, there at least is an awakening of humans to some of this stuff, just like some of us are. More and more people, I think, are awakening to the realities of cults like Jehovah's Witnesses as there is more information and as there's more discussion about it. So, I mean, it still sucks. It's horrible. I'm sorry you had to deal with it. Um, I'm sure you have a lot of trauma surrounding that. How could you not? Um, but
Yeah.
hopefully it changes. It is a gradual change towards something better by talking about this stuff openly.
Yeah. It took me a long time to get past all of that. When I was younger, because what I saw was violence. Anything that I didn't like, I reacted with violence.
Sure.
And anytime somebody didn't do what I wanted, I would react with violence. It took me a long time to curb that because I got it not only from my mother and in my immediate household. Remember, I would see my biological father beat his wives. You know,
Yeah, you were surrounded by it everywhere.
yeah. So basically, and I grew up thinking, well, it's in me. When I was younger and I didn't know how to control it. I'm like, it's just who I am. It's in my DNA. It's like I came up with all the excuses everybody else did.
Sure.
That's what I know, and that's how it's supposed to be. And it took me a long time to get out of that. It took me a very long time to get out of that.
Yeah.
Going a little bit forward from that meeting, from the elders,
Mm-hmm.
nothing happened to him. He was still given parts. He never got this fellowship. Nothing, absolutely that I saw. Nothing was happening to
Oh,
him.
of course not.
And of course, so therefore, because the two witness rule, they couldn't do anything. You know, even if the furthest chance in the world, they believed me and whatever, they couldn't. They by their own rules couldn't do anything to him because there wasn't two witnesses. It was just him and I, because there is not one predator, one rapist, one abuser that will do it in front of somebody else.
Sure. You get
So that,
the odd one who cops to it,
yeah,
but I doubt that when he was in front of the elders, he admitted it in any way, just like he did in front of your mom. I'm sure he just denied it all.
right. Again, I don't know because I wasn't there. I
Yeah.
couldn't. It's funny how they say that if you have a problem with your brother, you have to confront them, but he can't. What he said, I didn't hear what he said, so that I can rebuttal that.
Sure.
It was
Yeah,
also
that's a slippery slope there because how much do you subject a kid to as far as
yeah. What I'm saying, even as an adult,
yeah.
I should be able to. No, asshole, that's not the way it happened.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Kids are really behind the eight ball there. There's not they lack the power, they lack the tools.
yeah,
Um, they don't have healthy coping mechanisms. They don't know how to handle that stuff. They're really at a disadvantage, and no one
yes,
is helping them. Yeah,
no,
yeah. So let me ask you: Did the elders help you in any way?
Are you kidding me?
Of course not. I know that.
The help that they gave me was giving me the advice of not walking around with shorts or anything like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Really.
That's to them. That's the help that they gave me.
Were you
But
punished?
well, of course, I was as far as in the Kingdom Hall.
Right. Yes.
No,
I guess you weren't baptized, so like it's not like, and I mean, being female, you don't have privileges in the hall anyway, usually. But sometimes I'll take away like commenting privileges and things like that.
no, not at that point. I wasn't.
Gotcha.
I ended up having to call my biological father, and it was close to the summertime. I told him what had happened. He was livid. I asked him to please not call them, not contact them, just to send me a ticket to go over there with him. And we pretended that I was just going to go for vacation, as the same way that my mother pretended we were going to just vacation in Texas. I pretended I was going to vacation in Puerto Rico.
What goes around comes around.
And then when I got to Puerto Rico, my father contacted my mother and said, well, guess what? She's not going back. And the first time in my life while I was in Puerto Rico, because remember, to this point, it's been 15, 16 years of me going to Puerto Rico in the summer vacation. And it's always just been me. My mother had never gone to Puerto Rico while I was there.
Right.
And for the first time, now all of a sudden the whole family has to show up. And they all went from Texas to Puerto Rico. Now, mind you, something did happen in this course of time. My mother had gotten pregnant, and she had a medical condition when she got pregnant in late 79 or early 80s, because my sister was born in October of 1980. She got pregnant, had a tumor, had a lot of medical conditions, and they didn't think either one of them was going to make it. And my mother, of course, was not going to have an abortion because of the religion. And of course, praying to Jehovah, it all worked out. And she ended up having the child with a lot of complications. And my mother stayed in the hospital, and the child went home. I was a teenager. That child became like mine. It was like my sister was more than just my sister. My sister was my child.
Yeah, and I bet it felt good to have someone or something to love that kind of reciprocated it.
And thinking about it exactly at this moment, when you asked me back then if I had anything that I would do, like reading, I guess this was my outlet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Was my sister, and I would sleep with her on my chest. She became mine.
Yeah.
And it was strong connection. And even that, my mother tried to take away from me, because I remember one time I was in the Kingdom Hall. Mind you, she had been in the hospital for a long time, weeks after the baby was born. So the baby was with me. And I remember one time in the Kingdom Hall, the baby was crying, and all this, sisters were trying to hold the baby, and she was just crying and crying and crying and nothing. And then I said, let me have the baby. And the first thing that out of my mother's mouth was like, "You are not the mother." And I'm like, okay. So I actually had to secretly go around the other side Tell the sister, can you give me the baby? The minute the baby she came into my arms, she just fell out of sleep. She stopped crying, she calmed down, and she just fell asleep in my arms. This is the connection that we had.
Yeah, and your mom was probably jealous of that.
Of course, of course. That being said, one of the tools that my mother tried to use when I told her I was moving to, when she found out I was gonna stay in Puerto Rico, was to take my sister to Puerto Rico.
Of course it was.
Yeah. And of course, the way that she got me to go to her was, saying, oh, your sister misses you and she wants to see you. Will you go to your grandmother, her mother's, house? And I'm like, okay, I missed her terribly. That's like, being ripped away from your daughter,
Yeah.
And so I went over there. And then, of course, I was there for a little while, spend some time with my sister. And my mother says, I want to talk to you. Let's go for a walk. My mother, we're from a beach town. So quite literally, we just had to go outside of the neighborhood, cross the street, and then go through this little, I go like through 2 houses, and there's the beach. And so we were walking along the beach, and my mother, she has in her hands this little, it's like a little plastic. I think it was plastic. It could have been glass vase. I'm talking about small. It was like the size of the palm of your hand. And she had a yellow rose in there. And the yellow rose wasn't a real rose. It was, cloth, plastic, whatever you call it. And she goes into this whole thing. Just remember, that your family's in Texas, because the yellow rose is from the yellow rose of Texas. Your family's in Texas, and we love you, and your sister misses you. And then she proceeded to tell me, I just need to let you know that I am never going to leave my husband because of you.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's an aside.
Exactly. She goes, I am never going to leave my husband because of you, and I'm never going to take away your siblings' father away from them. And I'm like, at that moment, I felt like just taking that rose and throwing it in the beach, in the water, in front of her. But being conditioned the way I was like, okay, and I just carried that stupid little flower with me. So, but those words that sting.
Yeah, it stings. And I think, is that kind of, I don't know, I'm being struck in the moment by it. Is it kind of her way of, I mean, it seems like everything with you is a competition with her. That's how she sees it. And I wonder if she thought that you were trying to come between her and her husband because of the abuse that happened, and if she saw you more as competition than as a victim.
I never thought of it. I never thought of it.
It's just kind of hitting me in the moment, and it's really fucked up and going around in my head that maybe she saw you in that. Maybe that's what she was trying to tell you.
I never thought of it in that way, and that is a great possibility, because like you said, it was always like a competition of she's better, she's more, she's whatever than me, and that because like I said, I'm just like my biological father. My biological father has a huge personality.
Right.
And no matter what she tried to do, and how many times she tried to tell the brothers and sisters, don't let your kids hang out with me, I just have that personality that I draw people. And so no matter how many times she tried to get me to be isolated, people would be drawn to me. And I always had a lot of people around me.
And I'm sure she was jealous of that.
Probably. I never thought of it in that angle. I really didn't.
People liked you. And then her.
She tried to do, people still like me.
Yeah. And her husband is giving his horrible, sick, disgusting affection towards you. And I wonder if because I can't understand why else she would have said what she said. I'm not going to leave my husband for you. No matter what you do. It's almost like she thinks you were trying to take him from her in some way.
I again, this is just one of those oh my god moments. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, maybe it's something else, but it just struck me in the moment. And because it's just such a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere with this whole row, I mean, like, I almost thought for a second, stupid me, I thought for a second this was going somewhere beautiful, that she was going to, hand you this rose in the vase, and it was just something to remember your family by. It's a little manipulative, but on a level, there's like a connection there. But then for her to throw that in,
right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And for the longest time, I couldn't go back to that beach.
Oh, I can imagine.
For the longest time.
So did you stay in Puerto Rico?
I did stay in Puerto Rico. And I ended up having my, finishing my last year of school there. When I say finishing, is like I didn't quite graduate. And then I guess when my biological father said, "Oh, I'm going to have to send you back to Texas," which to me was mind blowing. One minute you're telling me you would take this man's heart out, rip it out of his chest and eat it, if you ever saw him in front of you, but now you're going to send me right back to that situation because, I am inconveniencing your bachelorhood.
Oh gosh. Is that what it was?
And in the meantime, I was with my grandmother, and I have to say, which I haven't mentioned yet, the reason why I never lost my mind, and to this day, has to do with that woman. She is the only person in my life that showed me unconditional love. She loved me for me, not because of what I did, how I behaved, how she wanted me to behave, who she thought I was supposed to be.
She just loved you for who you were.
Yes.
That is beautiful.
And I guess a lot of people in my situations don't have that. Not even one person that to show them that.
Yeah.
And that balanced me out. I read a lot of books, or when I say read, I'm talking about audiobooks because dyslexia is not going to let me read those.
Hey, that's okay. I have ADHD. I can't read a book. I can't focus on it. So I do audiobooks myself. So I totally understand. That's how I quote read as well.
Yeah. And one of the things that I remember, there was a book that had this comparison of, there was two sisters that were raised in the same household under the same conditions. And yet one of them turned out to be, of course, a drug addict, whatever, just let her life just go down, spiral down. The other one became stronger, and successful and blah, blah, blah. And they said that one of the reasons that changed is because that one that was successful had at least one person, an aunt, a relative, somebody in their life that showed them unconditional love, whereas the other one didn't.
Wow. I can really understand that.
So that balanced me out. Even that little bit that I would be, around her. This woman, even my mother, admits that there will never be another woman like her again. That she is an outstanding human being. There is not one person that you will ever find on this earth that will say anything negative about my grandmother.
Was she a witness?
No. She was hardcore Catholic.
Gotcha.
But she just loved people for who they are, never tried to change them, never, she's an amazing individual. And because of her is that I believe that that's who I try to channel.
I think that is awesome. I relate myself because I had a grandfather who would actually tell me things like how proud he was of me, and
Yes.
he would try to he produced some opportunities for me to do some things that of course my witness parents squashed, but at least I had those opportunities. At least I knew somebody cared and was presenting these opportunities for me to do some things that were cool, and that
Yeah.
he believed in me. Nobody else really cared, but I knew that my grandpa was actually proud of me.
Yes.
And that, I don't know, it always kind of fueled something in me, that at least I had this. I think we all need that one person. And I think that one person can come later in life. Um, I've got something I'm not going to go into in this episode. I don't want to spoil something that I'm going to do in another episode about that one person. But in fact, I think it's yeah, actually, no, wait, that will have come out before this one, so I will have already talked about it. Okay, well then, well then, I'll just say that in the Silvers episode, which is coming out very soon, I uh, I got to help this guy, and all it took was me believing in him and being there to listen and not telling him he was a piece of crap like everyone else in his life had always done. I think that it only takes one person sometimes to believe in somebody, and like I'm saying, it can even happen later in life, and people can change, people can turn their lives around. We all need a lifeline at some point, and I've had my own in my life. It sounds like you had yours, and I just think that that's a beautiful thing, and I hope more people, when you see somebody out there and people are treating them bad, maybe you could just be that one person. It doesn't even take a tremendous amount of effort just to be kind to somebody, and you have no idea what it might result in.
Yeah, and it doesn't take the, oh, I guess I can't do any, effective anything effective if I say one comment. Sometimes that's all they need is one comment.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. My dad told me only one time in my life. I mean, my dad, I don't know. He was never that. I don't know if he's ever said, I love you. I don't know if he was just not that guy. But one time when he was working for my wife and I, he said that he was proud of me. And I will never forget that. My dad was not a super great person. We had a very bad relationship, but it was all the more brought home by the one time that he actually said something positive about me. And
one time in a few seconds.
Yeah, that's all it took. You know, just, so anybody who's out there who's got somebody that you care about and you haven't maybe told them how you feel, all you have to do, maybe just one time, tell them that you're proud of them, tell them that you love them, or
That you believe in them.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
Anything they want.
Yep. And then be there. If offer to listen. And there are going to be some people out there who are energy vampires who will just suck you dry, who don't have any intent on ever reaching out for anything better, and you're not going to help those people. But there are other people who just they're hanging on by a thread and they just need somebody to stick a hand out and be like, hey man, like I got you. Come on up here. Let's talk about it. And then boom, they're off to the races.
Yes.
You know? And it's a beautiful thing when that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you had that, because it sounds like, in so much of your life, you really struggled to find that. I mean, even with teachers and things who are supposed to be that for kids.
Yeah.
So what did this lead to then with your grandma?
Well, I mean, I was there mostly with my grandmother when I was living in Puerto Rico. And so I couldn't understand why my father just was like, oh, you're going to go back to to Texas. And I was devastated, disappointed. But at the same time, I was happy that I was going to get to see my sister.
Yeah.
I missed her so terribly. I had a sister, or I have a sister in Puerto Rico from my father, but because at that time, all I saw her was on what is it, in the summer, and really it was only when the weekends my father would have her.
Right.
So it wasn't like all the time either in the summer, and so it's like I really didn't establish a relationship with her. I knew one of those things. Yeah, that's my sister, but that's as far as it went. We didn't establish a relationship. I used to feel bad as a young adult because I'm like, man, thinking back, she didn't have any other sisters. I had siblings, and it's like I wasn't even the sister that she needed.
Right.
And I was like, wow, she was raised an only child. I was like, wow. Thinking back as an adult, I was like, crap, I was a crappy ass sister. But that changed. That changed way later on. And I'm grateful for her and I love her to death. And that's my twin soul,
Yeah, that's awesome.
But now I had to leave, Puerto Rico, go back to Texas. And when I went back to Texas, of course, I had to go back into the hellhole. At this point, I was already 18, I think. I must have just turned 18. And my mother decided, I hadn't finished school yet because of the dyslexia. I had gotten, left back a year. So I was still 1 year behind. When I got to Texas, they sat me down, and I remember them having a conversation with me, and basically it boiled down to, you're not going back to school. There's no need for it anyway. So you're going to go to work. And my mother found me a sister that was a manager at a McDonald's and got me a job there. That was my first job. And for some reason, my mother, I guess, must have thought that I was going to give her my paycheck. Not. I mean, she would always make comments about how great this person was in the Kingdom Hall because they would work and give their whole paycheck to their family. And I'm like, no, I would rather buy myself some Nikes. Thank you very much.
Now, let me ask you, and this may be ignorant, and if it, I certainly mean nothing by it, but is that part of Hispanic culture? I asked that because a
lot of Hispanics do, especially the ones that come from these places, not so much Puerto Rico, but like Mexico and all these other places, because even if you make minimum wage here, it's a whole lot of money there.
Right.
So they do send, they keep the bare minimum to, for them to survive here, and they send a lot of the money back to their families.
I mean, it's also a way of control, in this situation, it may have just been about control, but.
Oh yeah. My mother immediately started charging me rent.
Oh yes.
You're going to give this much money. And I'm like, you don't need
it. Well, God forbid you get a leg up anywhere.
Right. So therefore, and I remember in that conversation, I must have said something that absolutely pissed my stepfather off. He lunged at me. And that was the only time that my mother grabbed him by the arm and told me to run. And I had to run out of the house. I don't remember what it was. I must have had something to do with the fact that I didn't think it was fair for them to charge me rent or whatever it was. Something stupid, But I remember him lunging at me. And that was the only time in my life that my mother actually did something to protect me.
Wow. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that he was probably like, oh, this bitch is coming back.
Well, that or he got his aggression out on your mother. I don't know if he...
No, he never touched that's one thing. Oh, let me tell you. The whole head of the household.
Yeah.
He's the head of the household. I'm the head of the household. I'm the one that you have to listen to. If I say jump off a bridge, you're going to jump off a bridge. It doesn't matter if I'm wrong or right. You're going to do it because I'm the head of the household and the Bible said so, blah, 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 blah. My mother's running joke was, He may be the head, but I'm the neck.
Right, right. She turns the head.
Yes. So she does. She actually makes him do what she wants in her own passive aggressive way. She has a way of manipulating, and she is so phenomenal at it that he thinks that it's his idea.
These people are just born for cults.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
man.
She is phenomenal at manipulating him to the point that he believes that it's his idea to do this crap when it's really her.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm at least glad she's not getting beat. Um, that's that's a good thing. I mean, even though she was beating other people, and it's pretty terrible.
Yeah.
The less beating, the better.
Yeah. I was that whole stain in my mother's perfect life.
Yeah.
Because remember, she had the perfect husband, the perfect children aside of me. I was the one that came from the worldly man, the one that beat and was drunk and blah, blah, and was a horrible individual. So I was a reminder of her failure.
Right.
So as long as I wasn't around, she was great.
Wow. So what did you do with that? I mean, how does your life progress from this? You've at least you've got a job. You're making a little money, which is a little independence. How did this progress?
Well, at that time, few months after, maybe 6 months after that, I ended up marrying the first brother that showed interest in me, and I really didn't even like him. I was like, okay, whatever. I was not in love with him. I didn't even like him. I didn't find him attractive.
Was it kind of a way out of the house?
It was a way out of the house.
Yep.
Because back then, and also culturally, women just don't leave their parents' house unless they're getting married.
Right.
So there were maybe one or two brothers that had gotten out of the house, got a job and got their own place, but never a sister. And never, a female. So that was just my way out of that house. And the thing is, in my mind, I'm like, I'll just get a divorce later on.
Oh, really?
I went into it like that.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I ended up getting married, and that ended up being abusive. Oh, let me back up, because this is quite interesting. We were dating, and you know how witnesses call, we were doing heavy petting.
Okay.
But it didn't go further than that. It
Sure.
really never went further than that. I don't know how my mother got wind of it. I really don't remember that. But apparently she got wind of it. The first thing she does, she goes to the elders and basically tells them that I was fornicating. I'm like, no, I wasn't. Then she tells me, you have till the end of the month to get out of this house. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I called him up and I said, hey, this and this and this happened. And he's like, okay, we'll get married at the end of the week. We'll just go to the justice of the peace and get married. I'm like, okay, fine. So I went to my mother. I'm like, well, guess what? You don't have to wait till the end of the month. I'm out of here in the end of the week. Bye. Then my mother, she looked at my stepfather like, what the hell happened? Because I guess this is what frustrated her. No matter what she tried, she couldn't control. I wouldn't let her control it. My situation.
For the first time in your life, you've got some power.
Yeah. So she was like, what the hell just happened? So how did she do it? She did it, her typical manipulative way. She went to the meetings, started crying, how I wasn't allowing her to have a wedding for me, and that I was going to get married at the justice of the peace, and she wanted so much to be a part of that, and I wasn't allowing her to be a part of that. I was like, a sister told me this. Oh, you need to let your mother do this because you're not letting her be a part of your wedding, and you're just going to do this. I'm like, what?
She's playing the martyr.
Yes.
My wife's mom was great at that too.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? And of course, you get trained at an early age. Don't tell what they said to you. So it's like, I didn't sit there and say, well, my mother kicked me out. That's why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what? My head's just spinning. So of course, me being the trained little puppet that I was, somewhat, I'm like, fine, you want to throw me a party? That's fine. Throw me a wedding, do a wedding, So she got to do the little, in the house wedding kind of thing. And I did that. And then I went off and I was married, and then shortly thereafter, I guess, him and I used to get into these fights all the time. And then it started getting physical. Our marriage, honestly, physically, we were together less than 10 months. We didn't actually legally get divorced on paper, we were married 2 years.
Gotcha.
But physically, we weren't together, maybe 10 months at maximum. I started getting physical pretty fast. And again, because that's all I knew, that's how my reaction to everything. I'm like, oh, you're going to hit me? Oh, no, bitch. And I told him, you hit me, we're both going to the hospital. I swear to God, we're both going to the hospital.
So was he the one who typically started it as far as the violence?
Yeah, because then he would try to pull that whole, I am there in the house. And if I'm like, shut the hell up.
Yeah.
That's not going to fly with me. So we would start getting physical. And I remember the worst time was the last time we were supposed to go to the meeting. Because we were sporadically going to the meeting. We were supposed to go to the meeting. I had to go get me, because sisters have to wear pantyhose. I had to go get me some pantyhose. I had my friend pick me up. And we went to, Walgreens or whatever it was and got me some pantyhose. I went home and I had to tell him like a child, stay here. I'll be right back. Stay here. I'm going to be right back. Don't go anywhere. When I got home, he was gone. I'm like, what the hell? So I'm going around everywhere looking for him. And finally the car appeared at the apartments. And I'm like, hold on just a second. I look in the car and I see 2 movie ticket stubs and I see beer cans, and one of the beer cans had lipstick on it.
Oh.
Yeah. And I go upstairs and he's passed out drunk. And my friend's like, do you want me to stay? And I'm like, no, you need to leave. And I was pissed. And she was like, well, if you need anything, just give me a call. I'm like, okay. But you need to leave, because I knew it was going to get ugly. So I'm shaking him. I'm like, wake up, where were you? And he's like, I didn't go anywhere. I'm like, you're lying to me. Where were you? Oh, I just went with my friends. You're lying to me. Where were you? I already knew all the answers,
Right.
So finally I'm like, oh, this asshole's not going to stay in bed like this, like if nothing's happening. So I took the sheets, right? I'm like, we had just been married a few months, so we didn't have a lot of stuff. It's not like he could have gone and got some other sheets. We had to constantly.
Being poor and newly married. Oh, yeah.
So it's like we only had one set of sheets. So I grabbed the sheets and I'm like, I'm going downstairs. And of course, we had one of those it was a cute little studio loft apartments that the bedroom and bathroom was upstairs and the living room and all that was downstairs. So I'm halfway down the stairs and I have the sheet over my shoulder. You have it like over your shoulder and around your neck.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided he put one hand on my left shoulder and the other hand, he grabbed the sheets and spun me around and I fell down the stairs and busted my knee. And I was in so much pain. It tore my cartilage. He knocked me down the stairs. And he just stepped over me, grabbed the sheets and laid down in the couch like nothing had happened. I went upstairs after, I don't know how much time, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I don't know. All I know is that eventually when I composed myself, I went upstairs. I hopped with one leg upstairs, went into the closet, proceeded to get his steel baseball bat, hopped downstairs. And he opened up his eyes just as the baseball bat was coming down on him. All he had time to do was put his arms up to his head. And then we both ended up in the hospital. Me with a busted knee and him with a his busted elbows.
Oh man.
The nurse was like, "Did you guys get into an accident?" I'm like, and I'm just looking at her. Any questions?
Our marriage was an accident.
Right. So I ended up calling my friend, that one that had driven me around, and I said, "Hey, can you come pick me up from the hospital and take me to the house?" I picked up all my stuff and then ended up going right back to the Lions Den because ended up going back to my mother's house. But I never saw him again after that.
Oh, really? And then you all, I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds like you separated and then you divorced.
yeah, because at the hospital, I said to myself, the next one, somebody's going to end up dead.
Yeah.
It was just proceeding to that. And I said, no, I don't want to end up in jail.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like there really wasn't much there
No.
Otherwise. So,
No. And when I got married, I was 19 years old, and he was 24 going on 13.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah. And I remember one time he had said, because he came from a very abusive family also. His father was one of those that packed up the family and moved to where the great was need in Colombia when he was a young kid, and made him work from the age of 8 years old. And all his money would have to be turned into the family because, of course, they were doing missionary work. So they didn't have money. So they had all their kids working, and they were living off of what their kids would bring in.
Oh, another great witness family. Nice.
Yeah. And so basically, when we got married, one of the first things he says, "I've been working all my life. I'm tired of working, and you're going to go to work, and I'm going to stay home." And I laughed in his face, and I said, "I guess we're both starving to death."
Yeah, you don't seem like the type who is ready to go make the money for that so that guy could sit on the couch.
Yeah. I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. Because what's funny is, like, even though I had been beat down, even though I had been abused, even though they tried to knock this out of me, I guess they couldn't knock out this fight that I have in me.
Yeah.
And no matter who it was, I wasn't going to, no. Now I'm at a point that I don't have to take it. I'm not going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, and in the end, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up that matters. And no matter what happened, you just kept getting up because that's just you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the part that I have to say most likely comes from my father.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I remember one time one of the neighbors, it was a Christmas party, and the neighbors, you could hear this screaming and yelling and things just, hitting the wall or whatever it was, breaking. And the lady runs out of her house, and it just so happened that I was standing in the front of the house. It was nighttime. And my father had just walked up next to me, and he happened to see the lady running out of the house. And then the man runs out of the house, grabs her by the hand, pulls her back, and he's beating her the whole way there. And my father very calmly takes a sip out of his drink. And he turns to me and he goes, "Don't you ever let anybody treat you like that." I found that quite ironic.
Yes. What is up with these people?
And he goes,
I mean, he beat your mom, right?
And all his wives.
Of course. That's right.
And one of the things he told me is, like, once they beat you once, they will do it forever. He said that.
Well, I guess he was speaking from experience, right? I mean,
right.
He's just telling you to stay away from people like him.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Gosh.
That's why it's like an oxymoron with my father. He was one thing, and then when he was another. Is like, which makes it hard to believe, even when I was seeing it happen, that it was happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe the term for that is, what a mind fuck.
Yes.
I mean, it's, yeah, very hard to wrap your mind around, and then hard to understand what is really going on when you're being presented with so many different sides of a thing. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
It's like shock and awe. It's just to confuse you so that you don't know what's coming next.
Right. And one of the things he did for me and my sister, he made sure that we were able to stand up for ourselves, and we don't take shit, And it was because that's what he he made sure that we knew how to do that. You know.
So what did you do after? So you get divorced from this guy.
Uh-huh.
So where did you go after that? I mean,
Back into the Lions. Then I went back to my mother's house. You know, and but at that time it was different. You know, because just like this might sound sick or whatever, but just like any human being, human beings have a type.
Yeah.
It's not just because you're gay, you're gonna screw everything that's your same sex, and not just because you're whatever. You have a type.
Yeah.
And that goes as well as pedophiles. They have a type. After you outgrow that type, they no longer have interest in you.
Right.
So I never had to fear that again.
Right.
You know. So that never happened again. The physical abuse, my mother always tried. I have scars on my hands from her, trying to hit me with an umbrella one time, and it just fell apart, and I was just like grabbing at the umbrella, and I have scars on my hand because of the wires. I remember one of the times that I had gone back to my mother's house. Again, this is coming from my father, because on my mother's side of the family, they're very, I can't say docile, but it's more of, they don't fight back like that,
Gotcha.
Except for this one aunt that's, like I said, she's the bane of my existence. And she's a witness, and oh my God, she's just a horrible person. Anyway, I remember one of her sisters I guess my mother told me to do something, and I'm like, I'm going to do it in a minute, and my aunt, of course, antagonizing. I wouldn't have my daughter talking to me in that fashion. And I'm like, who the hell are you to talk to me? Like that. You did this and this and this with your kids. You don't think we know that?
Right.
And then my mother grabbed my arm, and she dug her nails so deep in my arms. And I'm just looking at her with this straight, cold face. And my mother kept digging her nails even deeper. I guess she wanted me to cry or yell out. And I'm just looking at her with this, what?
Right.
And finally she let go. And when she let go, I looked down at my arms, and I had scars on my arms. She had dug in, and I was bleeding. And I actually had to peel some of the skin off of there.
And you're an adult, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
At this point, if I wanted to, I could put a lot of hurting on my mother.
So how did you get away from all this?
So
how do you get out of it? Because it sounds like, it's just this pattern, and it's this husband, and now it's back home. How do you get out?
So finally, I ended up, one of her sisters said, if you want to come live with me, as a roommate type situation, she made it very clear that I would pay her rent.
Sure.
I'm like, that's fine, so I ended up going there. And I guess ever since then, I've been more independent. Every now and again, I have had to go back as an adult to my parents' house, but that was only for a very small period of time. Like, I would lose my job, and I just ran out of everything, and I couldn't, make it again. So I'm like, hey, until I get my job, it's only going to take me a few, weeks or months or however long. I tried not to stay there more than 3 months. One time I had to stay there a little bit longer, but even then, I guess they got to a point where they just gave up, and they stopped fighting with me because they knew it wasn't going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
But I know there's something that I was going to say about that. I ended up, meeting, falling in love, falling out of love, getting jobs, doing this, doing that, and the other. My mother would always talk shit about my father. Always. I ended up at the age of 28, I guess. It was 94. In one of those times that I went to my mother's house, I decided, you know what, I need to it's time, I'm old enough, and this is when, even though I was out of the religion, I thought that it was still the truth. I'm like, it's time. Might as well just. I've lived a good life. At that point, I could have said, if I die tomorrow, I will have lived a life nobody else had lived, because I had, in one of those spans, I had moved to New York, and in New York, I ended up, doing a lot of things with celebrities. I lived a celebrity life without being a celebrity. I got to I got to ride in limousines. I was the one that would go to a club opening and say, "Oh, it's Yolanda with one," and I didn't have to wait in lines for anything. I was doing a lot of. I was what you consider a fly girl. I guess I was doing a lot of dancing for these artists, and so I would get backstage passes. I was on stage dancing. I was just living a life. Of course, I lived the whole rock and roll, sex,
Sure.
love, and rock and roll. Because you're thinking you're gonna die anyway. So I was doing all kinds of drugs, but because, sorry about that, my dogs. He wants.
Dog speaking up.
My I was, because of everything that I went through, and because I feel like I have such a strong personality, and I refuse to let anything control me. Even when I was doing cocaine, I always said, you know what? The day I wake up and there's blood on my pillowcase, I'm gonna quit. And sure enough, the day I woke up and there was blood, I never touched it again. And people are like, "How did you do that?" I'm like, it's mind over matter, you know? I am not going to allow anything to control me, whether it be a substance, a person, anything.
Right.
If I say I'm done, I'm done. And I had, like I said, was in New York living this life. And I got to go to the Grammys, a whole bunch of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, wow, look at this life that I have. So at that time, I was like, and I moved back to Texas, and ended up at my mother's house. And I'm like, you know what? It's time. I've lived a life. I lived an amazing life. And I said, it's time for me to just settle down and take things seriously, and decided to get baptized. And I got baptized in 94. It was around December, I guess. I don't know. I tried to put that date out of my head. I got baptized, and at first it was all great, because the love bombing.
Oh, sure.
And we're so glad that you're here, blah 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 blah. And I met some amazing people. Not everybody, individuals that are in the cult are not all in the cult just to be cultish.
Sure.
Some of them believe that this is, the way to God, and they truly, truly try to live up that life. And amazing individuals.
Yeah, there's some very sincere people in that.
Yeah. And luckily enough, this time around, I met some amazing individuals. And that's how I ended up getting baptized. So I ended up getting baptized, and, I made a lot of friends. And I remember one of those friends, here's a little thing I skipped over. In that time that I was out there doing a whole bunch of stuff, I discovered why I wasn't able to keep a relationship, any relationship. Even though I fell in love with these guys, I was never able to. It was easy for me to walk away from. It wasn't like I never felt like I had a deep, deep, deep connection. It was always superficial. And one time I had a best friend, and she and I guess, got physical, in a sexual way.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like my life went into a movie right before the character is going to die, that everything just flashes in front of them. Literally, that happened. And I'm like, holy shit, now I understand. So I came to the understanding that I am gay, but I kept that a secret.
Right.
I,
And then you would have to kind of keep that on the down. Like even inside you, you're going to have to suppress that if you want to be baptized as a witness.
exactly. So I'm like, you know what? I'm good. Let me just go ahead and do this. It's not like I have a complete revulsion towards men. Not at all. There are some men that I look at, I'm like, wow.
Right, right.
But to say that I could get an emotional connection with them, no, I can't get an emotional connection like that.
Sure.
So I figured, you know what? At this time, anybody who has lived a somewhat straight life and they all of a sudden come to this epiphany, they always think, oh, well, then that means I'm bi. I'm not
Right.
gay, I'm completely gay. I'm bi. So, I like men and women,
Right, right.
So I thought that I would be able to get in there. Maybe if I find the right brother, I'd get married and all of that stuff would go away. And like I said, I had met some really great people. Well, one of those people that I met, female, married, with children and everything, decided that she wanted to say that she had feelings for me. I was like, what?
That's a pretty risky thing for somebody to do in the organization.
Right. And I was like, oh my God. But me being the Satan's child that I was, I did not let her act on it. I said, no, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
And I said, I never told her, about me. But that's the thing about me. I would always have women coming on to me, always. And I was like, whatever, nope, don't swing that way at first. But now I'm like, oh man, all the opportunities I missed. But anyway, I would constantly get sisters doing that. This wasn't a one-off chance. I had a lot of sisters that would come on to me like that.
Nah, not in Jehovah's organization. No
Right.
way.
And what's funny is like the majority of them were always married.
Well, of course, because everybody is suppressing who they really are and trying to conform to, what they're supposed to be to make it inside the cult. So you have a lot of people who are probably married who are not heterosexual.
Right, definitely so. And the thing is, I would never let anybody act on it. And I never told anybody, that's how I felt or those were my experiences. So them coming on to me, like you said, it was a very risky thing because it would be like out of the blue. And I would always get, I don't know what it is about you, but I would always get that. And I always could see it coming because it would always be the same body movement. And they're like, I need to talk to you, and they're pacing back and forth, clapping their hands, rubbing their hands together. I'm like, oh shit, here it comes. It was always the same.
How weird did it get afterward? I mean, because if somebody, especially inside the organization, is coming at you in that way, and you turn them down, you both now know a thing.
Yeah, but I wouldn't let it get weird.
Really?
I would not allow it because I didn't want them to feel bad for it.
So you just kind of went on like nothing happened.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I'm like, hey, it doesn't matter. Hey, it's cool. Woohoo, let's go. I wouldn't let them act on it, and I wouldn't let them feel bad for it because obviously I felt, and there was a couple of them that I'd be like, hell yeah, but
But you knew what it would cause.
Exactly.
It would hurt you. It would hurt them, their families, their kids.
And I knew that they wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
I knew that the whole shunning, they would not be able to handle losing their family. I knew that these women were just vulnerable. Because I was the kind of person, I work on cars. I do all of this other stuff. I'm into everything. I was always the only female in a whole bunch of guys because it wasn't because I was interested in the guys, but because I had the same interest as guys.
Right.
And
One of those interests being the ladies.
exactly. It's like we have a lot of things in common. And it's like I would hear them say stories and I'm just listening. I'm like, okay, okay. But so to them, I was like, I was that person that wasn't too out there because I would dress nice. I would, I'm not saying I dress feminine, but I wasn't that hardcore, you could spot a mile away. I was the is she or isn't she kind of person.
Right. But apparently they could spot you, because they
Apparently,
were approaching you.
yes, they were approaching me. It was something that I made them feel comfortable because I always
Interesting.
make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, you said you kind of had like your dad's personality.
Yeah, yeah.
So what does this all lead to?
What this leads to is I ended up moving from the Dallas area. And let me backtrack quite a bit.
Okay.
One of the times that this was before I had decided to get baptized. This was, I think, before I moved to New York even. I came home one time. When I say came home, I went to my mother's house one time. This is when I was living with my aunt. A couple of things had happened in that time span. I came home to visit them because I was always there because of my sister, And one time I had my cousins there and that aunt that I can't stand. We're going to call her KKK because I can't stand her. So KKK was there with her daughters and they grabbed my keys and I'm like, okay, where's, my sister? Oh, hey, sit down. I'm like, why are you guys being so nice to me? And they're grabbing my keys and they're doing all of this other stuff, like trying to keep me away from the back. I'm like, where is my sister? And they finally tell me, oh, she's in the back because she's talking to your parents because something happened. And this is the name that I will tell.
Okay.
Because if this individual, when you hear the story, apparently his name has molested and raped a lot of young children, girls in their kingdom home. And my sister happened to be one of the victims. I was livid when I found this out. After everything that I've tried to protect my sister from. I was livid. I felt like a failure. And I tell my parents, what are you going to do about this? And the thing that came out of my stepfather's mouth was, first of all, we can't do anything. We're not going to call the cops. We have to leave this in Jehovah's hands and his organization because we don't want to bring reproof on Jehovah's name. And then you have to think about there are other families that he has affected. So we have to give them an opportunity to choose what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, he has to be in Jehovah's hands. And then he proceeded to tell me how we have to have compassion for him because this man has a sickness. I'm like, well, you would know, wouldn't you?
Oh, come on. And he's the freaking presiding overseer.
Yeah.
And your stepdad, I mean, like, he should have.
How can he judge when he does the same thing?
Right. And so you see how this stuff gets perpetuated inside the cult. You have basically pedophiles protecting pedophiles.
Yes. Yes. So this whole thing about how elders are appointed by Holy Spirit is bullshit.
Yeah, that's total bullshit. They're appointed because they meet certain criteria based on like how many hours, and are they yes men who will do what they're asked, and will they give talks? Are they decent speakers? That's all it is.
How many people will they keep in?
Yeah.
Bring in?
Right.
And what most of all, what the appearance of it all.
Yeah. How's it look? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So and this individual, like I said, has raped. I know of a little girl who was 6 years old when he literally raped her. I found this out later. Yes, he ended up getting this fellowship, but guess what? He's back and he's still around children. And that's the worst that has happened to him. Nobody has called the cops because they're not going to call the cops.
That's so awful.
Yet he has access to children.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably going door to door and knocking on people's doors where they have children as well. Not only inside the Kingdom Hall, but outside the Kingdom Hall.
He is a danger.
Wow.
And I just wish that one of the victims, I mean, my sister's so traumatized by this. I tried to tell her, you could take legal action. Doesn't matter. Take some kind of look at your options right now. Contact somebody, even if it's to bring a lawsuit against the society for not having taken action.
Yeah.
But she's so traumatized by this that she says she's going to, but I really believe that she's not. She hasn't.
And is she one of the, I can't remember which sister is she one who's still in?
She's not the one in.
Gotcha.
And then around that time, another thing had happened. That KKK's daughter, one time I came again to visit, and I'm like, what's going on? They're there again, This was in another time. I can't say that it was the same year. I can't say that it was the same month. I don't remember. I remember it was around the same era because I remember where I was working.
Right.
It was real close to where they lived, so I would constantly be going to the house. That's why I was there around that time. And I remember that I went to the house, and they were there, and they were having this. It was so serious. Come to find out that my stepfather had done the same thing to one of KKK's daughter that he did to me.
Oh,
Sexual. Yet again, nothing happened to him.
of course.
Yet again.
I think it's hard for a lot of active Jehovah's Witnesses. It's hard for them to believe that these things happen once.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the organization is rife with this stuff. There's so much abuse that goes on. And sexual abuse is awful and gets a lot of the headlines because you see the lawsuits and things like that. But it's domestic violence. It's just abusing children physically. It's emotional abuse. It's just you have an abusive cult that attracts abusive people, and they have abusive households, and it just makes you wonder what is going on in so many households that present as these fantastic witness families. And you don't want to throw everybody under the bus and indict everybody because, clearly not everybody in the organization is abusive, but there is just so much that goes on. It just makes your head spin.
Definitely.
It's just a culture of it.
Yeah. And it's the whole hiding of it. It's the, we're not going to let anybody else know about it.
Right. Which just perpetuates it and makes that culture go even deeper.
Right.
So, you've been around all this abuse, and, it's clear that you went back and you got baptized and, tried to play the game.
Yeah.
Though you've seen like all the things you've seen
exactly
are enough at least to cripple your faith in the people. But how do you extract yourself mentally from like the doctrines and things like that? How do you get out of that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I never actually got it. It was one of those things that I would go. I was the kind that would, you see my watchtower marked, but I really hadn't studied.
None of us did. None of us did.
Because it was funny. I mean, but I would always try to concentrate more on helping the people that I saw were down. I was always trying to be that one person trying to show somebody some light, you know.
Yeah, find that person in the back of the Kingdom Hall that nobody talks to.
I was always going for the underdog. I was always helping the underdog. I was always, whether it be a kid, whether it be whatever. You know, I remember a friend of mine, you know, she had 3 kids, and one of them was just, she would treat them not as good as the other ones, you know? And so that's the kid that I would gravitate to and say, hey, come with me. We're going to go to the movies. We're going to go see this. We're going to go that. And I would take him out of that house, you know, just so that he has some kind of, you know, something to look forward to, you know?
Yeah, and I bet you could see that because
I
of what
spot-
you had been through.
Yeah, I could spot it a mile away.
Yeah.
And so that's basically the position that I took, even though I may not bring anybody in, which I am so happy that I never was that person that went to and gave book studies and brought anybody in. There's
Me too.
one person in,
Yeah.
you know, but I was always trying to help the people that were there.
Right.
I figured, you know, I believed that was the truth. I believed that, hey, as long as I'm helping somebody, I'll be okay. You know,
so you kind of believed it sounds like you kind of believed in like the reward and punishment
yes.
that Jehovah had set forth, but you didn't really get into all the other stuff.
No. One of the things I remember as a young child, my mother had I heard her say, if you don't understand it or if you don't get it, it's because, not personally to me, she was just saying this in general, if a person, it's because Jehovah doesn't want you to understand it and doesn't want you as part of his people.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I guess I don't understand it. I guess I'm not one of his people, but at least I could help some of his people. That's the way I thought about it.
Right, but you did come back and get baptized, so apparently you were at least able to like you had the head knowledge to answer the questions to get baptized, but it sounds like it didn't really you didn't really own it emotionally as much.
No, I didn't own it anymore. I never did. Maybe it's because I had that whole push and pull from my father, you know, telling me, oh, this, you know, because he would tell me a long time ago that this was not right. That I can't remember if he ever used the word cult or not, but I remember he hated it. He absolutely despised it.
Well, it does seem that people who either grow up in quote divided households or who just have at least some close relatives on the outside that they're talking to as well, or that they spend some time with, it seems like if you kind of have that duality, or you have that experience where you get to kind of see 2 different sides, it seems like it helps people to eventually leave more than being born to 2 active J-dubs who, that's all you ever really know. It helps to have a little outside perspective.
Right.
So go ahead.
So I ended up getting baptized. I stayed around there for maybe a year, maybe 2, and I moved to a little bit more South Texas, to Austin. This whole time I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I moved to Austin, Texas, which is the best city that Texas has.
I've got friends in Austin, and we went down there about 2-3 years ago and saw them, and Austin is awesome.
Yeah. So I moved there. While I was there in 98, my beautiful grandmother passed away. And when that happened, it turned my life around within minutes. And I decided that I was going to establish a relationship with my sister because she had gotten married and had a child. And I'm like, this is my first nephew. and I want to get to know him and be a part of his life. And I needed to be as close as I could to somewhere that reminded me of my grandmother. And so I moved to Puerto Rico. When I moved to Puerto Rico, I ended up in this family with witnesses house that, I tell you what, when you say this is the type of family that witnesses should aspire to be. I stayed there for a year. They never once asked me for a dime. They let me stay there with them because I was having some issues getting back to the town where my sister and my grandmother and all that was, which was on the west coast of that island. I had to stay in the east coast, more or less, which is the main area where everybody goes to tourist. I stayed there. Again, there were some issues with my father. I couldn't stay where he was at. So these people extended their home to me. And to this day, they actually refer to me as not spiritual, but their sister and their aunts and, that kind of stuff, to this day. They love me, and I've never felt, other than my grandmother, unconditional love like I have with them.
That's beautiful.
And they were going to the meetings. So I ended up going to the meetings, and that hall was one that I'm telling you the witnesses should model. The people that were there should be the model of what a Christian congregation should be. There were times that I didn't go, and not once did anybody make me feel bad. When the minute that I'd show up, oh my God, we missed you so much. Come on, sit with me. It was like, what is this? And I never knew people like that existed. So it made it easier for me at that time to be part of that organization, because I felt true Christian. It wasn't just fake bombing. It was sincere, because to this day, I still have contact with them to this day, and they still treat me exactly the same way. Of course, they don't know a lot of the shit that I do.
Right. So, even then their quote unconditional love has some conditions.
It does. But I don't tell them, not because I'm scared. Yeah, would it hurt me to lose them? Yes. But I know that it would hurt them more to have to shun me.
Yeah.
Because to this point, I am not shunned, because I've never been disfellowshipped.
And now, so people just don't really know the life you live, I guess.
No. And even here's the ironic part. While I was in Puerto Rico, in this beautiful congregation, I ended up meeting a sister, and we had a relationship. Yes, that type of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it went on for 6 years, the whole time that I was there. Nobody to this day knows. My family now, some members know, but, she is so deep in that closet still to this day, that I remember one of the last things that she said to me was, and this is why we ended up breaking up, is like, she said, we were discussing something and ended up getting into a heated discussion.
Sure.
And she said, don't you know that what we have is abnormal? I just looked at her, and I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, it didn't seem so abnormal when we were having sex last night.
Right.
And I'm like,
so she's self-hating.
Yes, she's very self-hating. To this day, she will say, I will go to my death with this secret. And I told her, don't you think that your family already knows? And she says, yeah, I'm sure they do, but they're never going to hear it from my mouth.
Yeah.
So she's living a tortured life, and it's a self-torture because she does believe in what the religion has beat her down to.
So it's just so sad. You shouldn't have to live your life hiding who you are and
right,
feeling bad for it. And Uh, it's just sad that the external pressures that this all puts on people.
Oh yeah, definitely so. And so then while I was there in 2004, I guess, my little baby sister had gotten married. And of course, I went to the wedding, and she's like, "It's time for you to end this vacation that you have and come back home." I'm like, "No, I'm living a pretty good life. I was living a great life, And she goes, "What are you going to do if I get pregnant and I, you're not going to be a part of this child's life?" I already knew that my sister had been trying to get pregnant with everybody that she'd been with. So I'm like, "Sure, if you get pregnant, no worries. I'll move back." That little shit. 30 days later, she calls me up. She goes, "Well, pack your shit because you're coming home." And that just happened to coincide with that argument that I had. And I had already been done. Because she was living, that ex of mine was living a double life. When I said double life, it was a true double life. She had a boyfriend and everything that was in the organization, that was part of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that every weekend they would go out and she would be seen with him holding hands. But meantime, I had to walk behind them and look at this.
Oh, were you like the chaperone?
Yes.
Oh, God. Of course you were.
Yes. So I'm like, I can't take this. This is torture. This is absolute torture.
Yeah.
So I ended up, saying, "You know what? Since this is abnormal, I'm just going to pack my shit." Because so many things coincided at the same time. I was working at a company and they decided to do a mass layoff. And so I had the mass layoff. I was working some side jobs. I didn't really have a permanent thing going on. The argument happened with her. My sister calls me and says, "Come home." So guess where I'm going?
Yeah, heck yeah. Go ahead. Got nothing holding you back.
Exactly. So I'm like, "Okay, I'm gone." I packed my stuff and I left. And I came back to Texas because my baby sister was pregnant with my other nephew. Meanwhile, while I was in Puerto Rico, I did have ended up having a beautiful relationship with my sister in Puerto Rico on my father's side, and my nephew, and them that exist to this day. Like I said, she is my twin soul. And I am so grateful. And I remember we were talking about my grandmother not too long ago, and my nephew never met her. And he's heard so many stories about her. And I go, well, all I ever wanted to do was to be what grandma was to us, even if I made it halfway, and be that to my nieces and nephews. And my nephew from the back seat says, "Titi," he's like, "You're way more than that to me."
That's awesome.
So I'm like, whoa. So I was able to do that for somebody. Then I moved to Texas and to establish the relationship with this nephew. Well, at that time, we didn't know if it was a boy or girl. And I come back and I end up living at my mother's house, for about 9 months, maybe. So I moved back to Texas, and I moved back in my parents' house. I was there for a few months, and I ended up getting a job in the same building as my stepfather. Different companies, just coincidentally the same building. And at this time, we realized that the husband that my sister chose is emotionally abusive, and he, of course, thrived in the whole misogynistic religion.
Sure.
And I remember having a conversation because my stepfather and I would carpool, and we were talking about the abuse. I'm like, I don't understand. He says that he was so abused, yet, of course, he wasn't a witness. His family never this individual didn't know about the Jehovah's Witnesses until he got with my sister. And after she got married, then she decided she wants to go back to the meetings, and he became a witness, and that was the worst thing that she could have done for him. And so I had this conversation, and I said, I don't understand why it is that somebody who claims to be so abused can be so abusive. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that people cannot go back to how it made them feel so that they can stop doing that to somebody else.
Right.
And I'm sincerely just talking about my brother-in-law at that time. I guess it triggered a thing in my stepfather, and because we were going back and forth, talking about it. It wasn't an argument. We were just talking matter-of-factly, and I remember when we were going home, that was in the morning, and when we were going home, we had the conversation continued. He stopped the car before he got to we got out of the car. He was in the garage, and he goes, hold on. He grabbed me. He, put his hand on my arm. He goes, I want you to know that I am sincerely sorry for everything that I've ever put you through. He goes, I know that I am paying for that in my life. I know that I'm never going to go to paradise because of this. And he says, I am so sorry that I've done so much wrong to you. And he says this with tears in his eyes, and he puts his head inside on my shoulder, just buried it, crying. And I'm like, whoa.
That kind of takes me back to when he was saying, let's see, when your sister had been abused or raped by that guy in the Kingdom Hall, and your dad was like, well, we have to understand that, he's got his own issues too, or whatever. It makes you kind of wonder if your stepdad was kind of waking up to his own issues somewhere along in there.
You don't know? I don't know. It could be. I don't know, but I know
because the truth is that any of these people who molest somebody, rape they are people with issues. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be punished for their issues or whatever. It does lend some understanding to see them. Hurt people.
Yes.
Clearly, they've got some problems, but that also doesn't mean they're safe to be around.
No, definitely not. But I actually felt like he was sincere.
Yeah.
Like, look, the past is the past. It happened. Just, I forgive you, because he asked me to forgive him. And I'm like, I can forgive you because I'm past it. Does it come up? Yeah, it comes up. Do I have nightmares about it sometimes? Yeah, I do. I wake up in a cold sweat. Are there certain things that I see visually that trigger me? Yes. I can see a father with his arm around his daughter, and I have to leave the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are certain things, actions again that I see, and even in my adult life, I see them. Like if I have a partner and we're getting intimate, if they get too close to a certain area, I'm like, get off, and I'm done. I'm emotionally out of there at that point because of the things that he did,
Yeah, you can forgive, but you can't necessarily forget. The body has a memory, the mind has memory.
Right.
It doesn't just go away.
Yeah. And the thing is, I forgot to mention that before when my grandmother passed away, that I moved to Puerto Rico, there was a week there that I moved from Austin to Dallas, and I stayed with my parents. And he had apologized then too, in front of my mother.
Wow.
And then my mother pulls me aside and she says, I need to ask you a question. I'm like, what? She goes, did what you say really happen? And I'm looking at her, and my body literally started shaking. I couldn't control it. And I put my hands in my face, and I'm like, no. You are not asking me this. after all the times that he has apologized in front of you, you are asking me this? And I just walked away from her.
Yeah, she's a very sick person. I mean, and denial is a hell of a drug. I mean, it's addictive. People live their entire lives in denial and don't look at the truth of what's happening around them, which is how they end up in cults.
Yeah.
And then they perpetuate it. So has there been anything that has helped you to deal with, I know you didn't really over-identify with the doctrine a lot, but have there been any resources, any websites or podcasts or videos or anything or books? Has there been anything that really has kind of helped awaken you to the reality of what you were in as far as the cult goes?
I just barely started listening to podcasts, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you need to listen to this podcast." It had to do with some doctor or whatever. And that was the first time I picked it up a few months ago. And then the next podcast, I said, let me see. I said, Jehovah's Witnesses. And I put it down, and the thing that caught my eye was your My Life as a JW.
Oh, this JW Life, yeah.
JW Life. And I'm like, okay, let's listen. I heard that whole thing. I mean, I think it was in a week, and I just sat there, and every time I turned on put my earphones on, I was listening to it. And I was like, holy shit. Because up until that point, I don't like the religion. I don't believe in anything that it says. I don't believe on any of that. But then I started listening to other podcasts, and I'm like, holy crap, it was a cult.
Yeah.
It was truly a cult. Now, and then I started listening to other podcasts about different cults. I'm like, it's the same shit.
Yes, it is. I listen to them all.
It's the same thing.
Yep.
And now I'm at a point that it's funny how some people know some of my history. And there are people that are like, I don't understand how you can have a relationship with your mother and your stepfather at this point. And I go over there and I'm like, hey, Ma, hey, Dad, that's it, And I check in on them, see how they're doing. I talk to them for a little while, but there's no animosity there. And me, I just absolutely refuse to let them see that what they did broke me. I am not going to allow them to do that. And
so for you, it's important to kind of, you see it, and everybody sees this stuff in their own way. So, there's no condemnation here of anyone who reacts to this differently. But I understand that. So for you, it seems like you see it in a way where you just want to be you. And it seems like you're kind of trying to take the good out of it and to take it for what it is now and not what it was in the past.
Yeah.
And just make it that.
Yes. I learned from it. I learned how not to treat people.
Yeah.
It's always a growing thing. Right now I'm at the stage where I am learning about a lot of different cults and behaviors and, how people get into them. My house has become a refuge for everybody who is shunned. I have that sister that I tell you is in the organization, part of the JWs. She adopted her husband's kids, and the eldest daughter, these elders harassed the shit out of her until she decided to say, look, do what you want to do. She was already out. She had moved out of her house and got her own place, and she ended up with a boyfriend, and they have a very loving relationship, and they have a little girl. And when she got pregnant, the first person to turn her in was her parents.
Oh, yeah.
And my thing is that this child has gone through 3 different mothers, because her biological mother, her father separated, divorced her. And the second wife, she adopted these children. And then when he divorced her, he is such an ass. He got them to, give up their parental rights, and my sister adopted them. And all this child has been abandoned by 3 mothers, 2 of which were Jehovah's Witnesses. And now she sees me as her chosen mother.
That's awesome.
She comes to me and she asks for my advice, and I said, look, baby, this is what I would do. Don't just because I would do it doesn't mean you have to do it, kind of thing. They come to my house. I have a relationship with her and the child. I also ended up, little by little, I have had a lot of friends who have been either disfellowshipped or they have faded away and don't go to the meetings anymore. And all of them ended up at my house. I am that bridge for some of the ones that are divorced, for some of the ones that are shunned. Because I am not shunned, I can get information from their family to them. There was one that was like, okay, my grandmother is in Puerto Rico and that hurricane happened, and because he's shunned, nobody would let him know if his grandmother was okay or not. So I reached out to my people in Puerto Rico and found out within an hour. I found out the information once I was able to get, emotionally ready to speak to all these people.
Wow. So, I mean, first of all, that's a wonderful, service that you're able to provide, basically. But do you worry? So, I mean, hanging out with shunned people is a great way to get shunned yourself. So, do you worry that somehow this is going to get back to the wrong person and then you're going to be on the shunned bus as well?
I haven't gone to a meeting since 2005. If it happens, it happens. It's not a fear of mine, but I'm also not looking for it. As abusive and all of that as my mother has been, believe it or not, she's batting, what is that? 2 out of 4 of her children are gay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, at first she did, kind of try to keep her distance, but something had happened because I ended up getting married to a female and there was a lot of issues there. But there was a time there that I went, 2, maybe 3 years. I don't remember just right now. I don't remember the exact time, but there was 2 or 3 years that I went without talking to her. I just faded away from her life. I said, I'm done. I'm not going to deal with this judgmental shit. I'm done. And I didn't go back to her house. I wouldn't call. I wouldn't text. I wouldn't let her know anything about me.
Right.
And I guess she did a couple of things that was lashing out, but I knew, it was just her lashing out because she was upset because I was the one basically shunning her. And I'm like, no, I'm done. I can't deal with this shit. And at some point something happened and I decided just to reach out to her one time that it was her anniversary. And I just said, happy anniversary. And she just went in on that in a good way. She was like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And she just tried to pull me in. And she was like, come on over to the house. And when I came to her house, she just, hugged me and was kissing all over me. And ever since then, she has been scared to do something that's going to make me go away from her life.
Because she needs you.
Yeah. And so I'm like, now, she knows that I was married to a female, and my brother was able to take, they were able to meet his partner, his husband now. And they actually have established some kind of as much a relationship as they can establish,
It's so fascinating how, I don't know, just how some parents react in that way, like your mother, who is really Desperate to have a relationship with you, even though, she's technically not supposed to. And then there, on the other spectrum, are parents like my own parents shunned me before I had even done it. Before we even left, both of our families had shunned us.
Yeah.
It's like some can't wait to shun your ass, and others are, at the other end of the spectrum, and they're more permissive and all this when they're supposed to be shunning you,
Right.
as good witnesses or whatever. It's just, the humanity runs the gamut, and just all the different reactions you have to all of this within the organization, despite what their rules are. And I don't know. It's just really interesting to me how, because look, you're like, you and your brother are actively doing something that they like. There's no way around it.
Right. Right. I can't hide that I was married to a woman. There's no way I can hide.
Right. You can't hide that, and there's no way for them to really weasel their way around the scriptures as they see them. Like there's no way around it, but yet they're still okay doing this thing. And it's just funny how, as witnesses, we all had like levels we would push the boundaries to.
Yeah.
Mine weren't really that far, but some people would push them so far that, like in this case, they're talking to their daughter who is in a same-sex marriage, which is, hey, good for you. That's awesome. But they aren't supposed to believe that way. It's just the mental games we all had to play to get through that life as a witness. It's just amazing what we are capable of doing to justify things.
Yeah, it's a lot of jumping through a lot of fiery hoops.
Yes.
And it's justifying why you went through there and didn't get burned.
Yep, absolutely.
But my mother, I had ended up getting really, really sick, and it just so happened that, and I'm glad that it happened in the order in which it happened, because I went back and I was talking to her again. I'm not going to any meetings. I have no intention of going back to any meetings. My mother, reached out to me. We started this relationship. And in there, she actually also, for the first time in her life, sincerely apologized for everything that she did to me. So I got another apology.
Wow.
Yeah. And then shortly thereafter, I ended up getting really, really sick. I had cancer, and I've done a lot of things that I definitely should be shunned by everybody. Because while I was in the surgery, the doctor says, look, you're extremely anemic. There's no way you're going to make it out of here. Your blood count is at, I think it was like the cell, whatever blood cells, they were at like 4 or 6 maybe. And that's really, really low. They said, we need you to, normal is 8. I think it's something like in the teens. At least at an 8. And the only way I was able to survive that was getting some blood transfusion. And my mother was every day going to the hospital, and I ended up having to lie to her, because in the process of all of this, I ended up getting a divorce. But my mother absolutely did not like this woman, because this woman ended up writing my mother. I hadn't told my mother I was married. My ex outed me to my mother about my marriage.
Oh, no.
When we had gotten married, because she said, did you tell your mother? And I'm like, yeah. She ended up photocopying the marriage certificate, writing my mother a nasty letter. Who are you to judge us? Blah, blah, blah. You call yourself a Christian, blah, blah, blah. And we're married. And I'm like, what the fuck did you just do?
Oh, so much drama.
Yes.
Oh, so
then what happened is, like, we were on the outs, right? And we had again, she had moved to Florida right when they had diagnosed me with this. I'm telling you, she moved out. She moved to Florida. 5 days later, I got diagnosed with cancer. It's like 2 weeks later, I was in the hospital having surgery. And my mother was going to the hospital every single day and spending hours just sitting there. And I actually had to, me and my sister and some other people had to tell her, look, we're not going to be able to have you here because I told her that my ex was going to be there, which was a lie.
But just anything to get her away.
To keep her away, And then my sister had put a sign on the door that said, do not disturb, do not enter. So that in case anybody else from the family were to show up, they couldn't come in while I was having this blood transfusion.
Right.
And again, because you get so indoctrinated with this shit, I'm panicked. I'm having this stuff, looking at the blood going through me, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm really doomed.
Right.
This is the epitome of it all. I could come back from being gay. I can't come back. So I'm like, I'm done. Anyway, so I ended up having that procedure. And like I said, I'm grateful for the fact that prior to any of me even getting sick, my mother apologized to me. Because if it happened reverse, I would have said, oh, she's just feeling guilty.
Yeah, and I think that it's not an excuse for parents to do messed up things to their kids. But I think that an apology goes a long way. And I think that most people just want to be acknowledged. That's all.
But it's a sincere apology. You have, the person that's receiving the apology has to feel that it is sincere. Because my mother had, in her words, apologized. But I told her point blank, I will not accept your generic apology, because she said, if I've done something in your past to hurt you, then I apologize.
Oh, that's a weak apology.
I'm like, no. I said, no, I do not forgive you. I do not accept your apology, because I am not going to accept a generic apology.
Yeah, you got to come stronger than that.
So it has to be a sincere apology,
right,
for somebody to start healing.
So where are you in your life now? Or what do you like about the life that you've got now, where you've kind of woken up some, you're, just living life and maybe not quite so attached to all this toxicity?
I am in a place that I am so much at peace with who I am. I've chosen, and this was a battle that I had, and this is something that I have to work on every day, but I get to choose who I want to be and how I react to my past.
Yeah.
Because if I allow myself to go into a depression, to me, they are still controlling that. And I was able to forgive them because it allows me, for the longest time, I'm like, if I forgive them, then I'm letting them get away with this. They don't deserve to get away with it. But because I feel like I didn't forgive them, I felt like I was holding on to it myself, and I was keeping myself anchored there.
Forgiveness is for you. It's not for them.
It took me a long time to come to terms with that.
Yeah.
And when I was finally able to forgive, and again, the apologies go a long way.
Yeah.
I was able to let go, and I get to choose who I want to be, how I react, and that's really the message that I would love to, just say, is the fact that, yeah, there are people who have gone through a lot more horrible things than I have, but remember, what they want to take away from you is the power that you get to choose what you want to be and who you want to be.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, so who do you want to be? What dreams do you have for your new life? What do you want to make out of the years that you have?
Right now, I am, I bought my home. Actually bought a home on my own.
Nice.
And I've gotten into, at the age of 52, I learned how to ride a motorcycle.
Awesome.
And I bought myself a motorcycle. I'm in a club not a gang. We're not
You
going
New
out.
Yorkers.
But I joined a club where ladies ride motorcycles, and that's my church every Sunday. You know,
Awesome.
Sunday mornings we go and ride motorcycles all the way around. Of course, if it's good weather, if it's really cold, I'm not going anywhere on that thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And I started a business, dog breeding. And that's where my focus is in right now, is just establishing that business. I am trying to help as many people as I can that are out little by little, as like they've just gravitated towards me. And my house has, like I said, has become a refuge for them, and letting them know, hey, you get to choose if you want to go back. I don't get to judge,
Yeah.
If you want to stay out, know that you have a lot of options. You do have a lot of options. I have a one of KKK's daughters,
Mm-hmm.
as the one that actually went through the same experience as I did, has a daughter that ended up getting this fellowship, and I didn't know about it. And when I found out about it, I reached out and I said, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, emotional support, know that you're not alone, because that's the thing that they want people to think. They're alone.
Yes.
You can't survive without me. Just like any abusive relationship with a spouse,
Yep.
that the first thing they say is like, you're going to be nothing without me out there. Who's going to love you the way I do? And so you feel like you got to crawl back because you don't have a job, because they make sure to put you in a situation in which you have to depend on them. So I let them know, hey, yeah, there are options out there for you.
Yep.
You don't have to go back. You don't have to do this. I'm not sitting here trying to create any kind of riot. I'm just letting them know that you have options and you have somewhere here for a refuge. If you want to talk, I'm here. If you want to get out of that house, I'm here, because they're not talking to her. They live there and they're not talking to her, and she's distraught about that. I have a lot of people that I've taken under my wing in that fashion.
Well, I think that's awesome that you've done that. If you could say something if you could give a piece of advice to people who are out there and who are shunned, what would you say to them?
There are a lot of other options that they don't want you to know that you have. Sometimes these, people in the cults, they want to make sure that you don't know about those options.
Mm-hmm.
So that you do go running back to them. There's going to be somebody out there who will be able to help you get through this. Worst case scenario, make yourself stronger and know that you have a choice. You always have a choice. Don't let them take that choice away from you.
Yeah. I think that it was Viktor Frankl in his book Mankind's Search for Meaning was talking about being in the concentration camps, and he said that the one freedom that no man can take away from you is your freedom to choose how to, I think it was like how to feel about a situation.
Yes.
And like, that's not to say, and I don't want anyone to ever hear that I'm saying that you can control your reaction all the time. We're not perfect, and we all have scars and we all have deep pain, but over time, and if you want it to get better, you can do the work to change the way you feel about a thing.
And it takes a lot of work.
Yes, it's not immediate.
and that's like a muscle.
Yes.
You have to constantly be working it out. You have to constantly be working on that and giving it that reinforcement all the time.
Yeah, you don't want to live a life that is completely marked by automatic responses to situations that you did not create.
Right.
You want to try to find your way to something better. And it sounds like you've found a lot of better things. I mean, I know I have. I was just saying to my wife the other day that I think that, I mean, what, 2019 is like 20 days old now, but
Right.
I was just saying, like, I feel like I'm in the best place I've ever been at in my life, just in general, and I've only been out of the cult for a few years, so I think now granted, I had about 8 years of waking up before I officially left the cult. So I think that, just everybody has time and we can all find better places. And uh, I'm really happy that you have.
Thank you.
And I think that's, unless, is there anything else that you had to, that we didn't get to that you'd like to say?
I'd like to say that if you ever think that at this point an apology is late because it's done the damage, you don't know how much an apology can help start
Yeah.
the healing.
Yeah.
If you're the one that did something wrong, or you felt you did something wrong, apologize. It goes a long way to start the healing process.
Yeah.
And one kind word from somebody you see is suffering, even if it's an acknowledgement, I know you're suffering, and let them know that there's nothing that lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever.
Yep. It's just a moment.
Exactly.
Was it life is a snapshot? I mean, life is a film strip, not a snapshot. So this one little frame of this film strip may be pretty ugly, but the film goes on. So, hopefully we can all find better things.
Definitely so.
I want to thank Yolanda for being so open. I think that her toughness was on display even in the interview, because she was so brave in telling some of these things that she's been through. That can't have been easy to do. I really enjoyed talking to her, even though, the subject matter was pretty heavy, but she was a fun interview. Her spirit really shined through. We were able to joke about some things and, even some serious things to kind of lighten the mood. But it was just really awesome to get to know her a little bit and to help her put this story out there so that others know that, this kind of stuff is happening. It's happening probably in your local Kingdom Hall, if you were listening, and one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or really any group that you're a member of where so much secrecy and so much emphasis is put on appearance. There's going to be these things that are happening, and people are hiding them. You can go to shunnedpodcast.com to leave a message of support for today's guest and to find the resources mentioned, or to pick up a t-shirt or hoodie, which actually helps to support the show. You can help by sending me an email there, or even a voicemail that I can include in an episode. Follow us at Shunned Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group and get into interesting conversations in a supportive environment and find out things behind the podcast before anybody else. If you want to hear my story, you can do so on the podcast called This JW Life. There's two ways you can support the podcast. One, which I already mentioned at the outset of the show, is that you can help by donating at patreon.com/shunned. I'll even shout you out here if you sign up. You can also leave a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts from for Shunned and This JW Life. We're going to go ahead and close this episode out with the song No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. You can find a link to her song, to the Patreon page for the show, to resources mentioned and more, not just on the website, shunnedpodcast.com, but if you're listening on a podcast app, you can probably get it all in the app by looking at the description. So as we end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.